No. Take two. Good afternoon. all. Good afternoon. Welcome to our strategic planning session. This is going to be an interesting and exciting day for the future of the airport. So we're thrilled and appreciate your willing to come here midday and also spend some extra time with us. I'm sure will be showing up soon. Let me ask, has the agenda been posted?
Yes, the agenda's been posted.
Do we have a forum?
We'll take roll call.
All right, roll call please.
Commissioner Banks,
Here.
Behrman,
Present.
Burke,
Here,
Caldwell is excused, Corcoran,
Here.
Dada is on his way, Delgado, Feltman,
Here.
Fong,
Present.
Hughes is excused, Martin,
Here.
Michaelis,
Here.
Park, here, Pye,
Here.
Suero, Wise,
Here.
Wiseman,
Here.
Young.
Here.
Thank you, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Any changes need to be made to the agenda? We good with the agenda? Need a motion to approve the agenda, please?
Second.
Seven.
We'll
Christine?
take a roll call vote. Commissioner Banks?
Here.
That'd be yes, no, or abstain, please.
Yes.
Behrman,
Yes.
Burke,
yes,
Corcoran,
Yes.
Delgado is not here yet, sorry. Delgado is absent. Feltman,
Yes.
Fong,
Aye.
Martin,
Yes.
Michaelis,
Yes.
Park,
Yes.
Pye,
Yes.
Wise,
Yes.
Wiseman,
Yes.
Young.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I realize that, in our haste, we missed our pledge. So, David Feldman, would you please lead us to the pledge? Thanks, David. Are there any scheduled public speakers?
We do not have anyone scheduled for press comments. Anyone in the room who would like to speak in public comments today?
Or on Zoom? Seeing none, let's proceed. I believe we would like to start with Scott. Is that true? Are we right? Am I with you, Christina?
Yes, for introduction.
All right. Welcome our city manager, Scott Stiles, who wants to present to us and kick off this very important session.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Want me to just sit here? I'll sit here. I'm just gonna take it. Oh, if that day comes in here, then I'll change. Okay, if he walks in, then I'll leave. Right. Well, so first of all, just, I want to thank everyone who's listening in on this call, participating. This whole open house, process is so important. Comprehensive planning process. I know all of you are well familiar with the challenges that we have down the road, and what we're trying to accomplish for this incredibly important, valuable transportation facility for the whole Coachella Valley. It's just incredibly important, really, and we're really going to depend on all of you for your future vision to help guide us as we move forward. The growth in the airport has been significant, and it's only going to continue to grow. I think Harry is, as I've talked to Harry, I think we had about 3 million visitors come through the airport in the last year. And over the next 10 to 12 years, we're expecting that to grow to over 6 million. We're talking about going from 18 gates to 31 gates. So those are significant. When I presented to the city council our biennial budget in July, I think we had 65 full-time employees here at the airport, and we added 49 more positions. So, we're talking about some major changes. We want to keep pace with business. We want to keep pace with the region. And we all want to make this facility just, you know, the best facility it can be. We've all heard the comments, people that come through here, and they love this airport like no place else that they've ever flown into. So we want that experience to continue. You know that we've got a couple big initiatives underway right now with the whole concession agreement, and so that's underway. We're renovating some of the gates. I know you're gonna be talking more about the terminal expansion options and what that looks like. We've had a lot of really tremendous good participation from the public on some of our open house discussions about what those terminal options might look like. Those are some of the short-term things that we have underway, but then just the long-term, the medium and long-term thinking that all of you are going to bring to this discussion, I think are just going to be tremendously important for us. And so this master planning process, it's going to help guide me in my thinking for the budget for the airport and where we're going down the road. So I really appreciate all of your participation and any other participation from the public that might be joining in on this. So again, just thank you. I just wanted to stop by and just say thank you for all you're doing. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, appreciate it. All right, let's get to it.
1 second, we're gonna put up the presentation. Thank you, Scott. Sorry. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. So we're doing this in 2 chunks today. The first chunk is the strategic planning piece. For those of you who are new, we're going to bring you up to speed in some of the discussions that were held a year ago, September. Just to provide a bridge in terms of kind of where our thoughts were a year ago. Lots of things have changed. And then what takes us to today, we'll talk about accomplishments that we've had at the airport over the last year or 12 to 18 months. And then in terms of future perspective, or kind of our visioning exercise, then we'll move right into long-term planning. Because a lot of the content in that part of our agenda will really lay out what the possibilities are, and we have some big decisions or recommendations to make as well. So we're going to focus strategic planning first. Harry and the team are going to run that piece, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and look at the long-term plan, where we take it from there. Fair enough?
Sounds good.
Very good work.
Thank you, Vice Chair Corcoran. So, Kevin pretty much teed that up for me. We're going to start, really where I wanted to start was with division highlights, things that we have accomplished over the last 12 months that maybe some in this room didn't know about. So we'll go through each division and I'll outline some of our accomplishments. That'll set the stage for some of our thinking as we go dive into the conversation about future stuff. I think we're trying to still work out the presentation and try to blow it up. I make it larger, it's a little easier to read. I'll keep working on that. I'll go ahead and get into some of the highlights. So, and you have hard copies, great. So
We have a hard copy. Let's follow along, because I know we tried to bump up the fonts on these for you, but why don't we just follow along with hard copies, so we don't have to waste any time making any adjustments.
So on the administration side, some things that we've accomplished over the last year, obviously, as Scott alluded to, was the airport reorganization. The commission was heavily involved in that. I do appreciate your efforts and discussion with the city council. We did successfully get approved 49 additional FTEs for the airport. If you remember earlier this year in the spring, I was basically doing a comparative analysis with other airports of our size, type of operation. And the next most compatible or comparable airport had 99 individuals working for them. We had 48. So we had a ways to go. We were able to get 49 additional FTEs approved. There's still room for growth there, but that at least put us on the right track to actually being able to handle and manage the capacity of not only aircraft, but passengers coming through the facility. We were successful in a 2-year budget adoption. We're also successful in a new airport use and lease agreement with the signatory airlines. There are 7 signatory airlines that operate out of here, most of the major carriers and a couple of foreign carriers that are signatory. Signatory meaning that they've signed long-term agreements with the airport, and in exchange, they have certain privileges and rights. That was a 2.5-year negotiation. So I came in the middle of that negotiation. We were able to close that out earlier this year. That was a huge win for us. And we'll talk a little bit about the AU later in this presentation. We were able to successfully award the retail and food and beverage concessions program. So we're doing that right now. We're doing our concessions. Job fairs to be able to boost the staff up there. The staff at the airport. We executed 58 additional contracts. We have boosted our airport concessionaires at ACDD and DDE goals for the year. We secured an agreement with Turo for peer-to-peer vehicle sharing services. And we've improved staff development and succession planning. So we've provided stretch opportunities to some of our individuals who have been tenured on staff so that they can have professional growth. And we're also working on providing them formal training so that they're ready for their next promotion, so that we can bring new energy to the organization. And then we've increased revenues by $14 million in the last 12 months. Next slide, please. On the maintenance side of the house, our maintenance division has completed this year 8,718 work orders. They've done repair to Taxiway Hotel, which had begun cratering earlier this year. Airfield repairs to the tune of about $1 million. Terminal building repairs to the tune of about $400,000. HVAC repairs and upgrades. We were getting some complaints about the efficiency of our HVAC earlier this year. We've since corrected that. Regional jet concourse replacement. If you haven't flown through the RJ concourse recently, it's got all new carpet in it. We've restructured the staff within the maintenance division, providing opportunities for frontline staff. We've done baggage handling system improvements, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well later. But for those of you who were around a couple of years ago, we had some issues with the outbound baggage handling system. We've since, at least to date, we've been able to manage those issues. That system does need to be replaced, but we were able to create some efficiency that got us a couple more years of life out of it. And then we executed 18 maintenance on-call contracts with 2 product supply contracts. On the marketing side, we launched a new brand. We also launched a new website, and just recently, within the last couple of weeks, that website was awarded Best New Airport Website by Airports Council International North America. We pursued and were successful in getting Alaska nonstop service to JFK. We are working with other airlines to expand our East Coast routes, because we do believe there are opportunities there to grow the service to the East Coast. We have a new in-terminal advertising program that's decluttered baggage claim, and it's also increased revenue. Just in the first few months of operating, the revenues that we're getting from Fuse, who is our new advertising program, have surpassed those of the previous advertising vendor. We launched are launching a new newsletter, Sunny Skies Ahead. We implemented a new trip planning tool on flypsp.com. We developed a new social media strategy and media policy. We deployed our navigator, our volunteer navigators, post-security. The reason for doing that is so they can get eyes and ears on some of the issues behind the scenes and be able to facilitate passenger experience. And then we're, I believe next week, rolling out a new Lost and Found program that will be web-based. And then finally, on the operations and the security side, we completed aircraft gate resurveying and marketing. And in addition to that, we implemented common use. For those of you who don't know what common use is, it essentially gives us a little more flexibility to put most aircraft to any gate, assign them to any gate versus one airline can only operate on one gate, so we were able to successfully do that over the last year. We have created some ramp improvements for Signature Flight Support, redesigned their ingress and egress access. Gatekeeper, we rolled out a new ground transportation system. We also, on the security side, rolled out a new system called Air Badge, which manages our badge population and gives us a little more flexibility and ability to monitor and audit our badge population. We installed signage and lighting in the overflow parking lot. We rolled out aviation worker screening over the summer. So they're basically an augmentation of TSA, where we're now able to screen some of our employees coming through the facility, make sure there are no nefarious activities at the airport. We are rolling out FAA required safety management systems program. In fact, I just signed a staff report earlier today for that. And then we renovated our airport control center. So those are the large activities that we've done across the larger lines of business. There's a lot more there, but you can see what the staff has been working on over time, and it's been a lot. And that really does set the stage for what we're going to talk about, which is a strategic business plan, which is ultimately where I'd like to go in guiding the organization. We don't have a plan now. We haven't had a plan historically for the airport. So for 2024, that's going to be my mission.
Hold on 1 second. Before we jump to that, any questions on what's been accomplished since those commissioners who are new, you may not recognize some of these projects. Do you have any questions? Do you understand what's been presented? Any clarification required by area and team in terms of what we've done so far? Are we all with it? Folks on Zoom, okay?
Commissioner Banks?
Yeah, just one question. Regarding the hiring, is there, do you have visibility into how that's going and kind of where, like, I see the job fairs going on, which is great, but do we have, visibility to how long that's going?
For airport staff specifically,
Yeah.
we actually got slides that address.
So we had a slide with it.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, Carrie, go ahead.
So as I started, so our plan for 2024 is to implement a strategic business plan. And I believe I have a slide that has. And the reason we need that plan, we want to be able to communicate our vision to the community and to the stakeholders very clearly and articulately. Give the PSP organization some direction so that we're not doing things aimlessly, but we have strategy attached to it and know what we're doing. Define and track progress toward key goals and improve business decisions. Like this. Over the next year, we want to set priorities for the subsequent 4 to 5 years. And that would start with our mission and vision. Our mission and vision, when we branded the airport, we actually codified those earlier this year, so we do have those in place. Strategic goals, we want to be able to set strategic goals to march toward and objectives. Action plans, so tie the action plans to those strategic goals so that we know that we're being consistent across the board. Implement some performance measures for those goals and objectives, making sure that we're tracking those over time. And then ultimately at the end of next year, or by the end of next year, I'd like to have this documented, formalized by this commission, and then we'll post this on the website, distribute this as necessary so that the public can understand what exactly we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're getting it. Are there any questions about that? Thank you. Slide. Earlier, I mentioned that this year we completed negotiations on an airport use and lease agreement with the signatory airlines. And for those of you who weren't around a year ago, for the last 2 decades, we have been operating under an agreement with the airlines that was basically a residual agreement, meaning the airlines covered the cost of operations for the airport. In exchange, they had significant say in our capital program. And at the end of each year, we would have to true up with the airlines, make sure that we basically paid down their rates at the end of each year. Almost 3 years ago now, we entered into negotiation with the signatory airlines to renegotiate their agreement. I believe their last agreement was 8 years old, somewhere around 8 years old. And with that came some changes in not only the rate making structure, but how resources were used across the airport for the airlines. So the rate method went from a residual method where the airlines cover the cost of operations to a hybrid compensatory method, meaning that the airlines cover the cost of everything associated with the airfield of the airport. That airport takes responsibility and the risk associated with everything in the terminal and land side. So we're responsible for generating those revenues, making sure we make up any shortfall. And then we have a profit sharing agreement tied to that. It's 50-50 with the airlines now. We bumped up our cash reserves. So under the old agreement, the agreement called for 60 days cash on hand for the airport. That didn't really give us a lot of flexibility at all. That's now bumped up to 360 days, so almost a year days cash on hand for the airport. Our majority and interest clause increased. So the majority and interest clause is the clause that basically says that we have to confer with the airlines anytime we want to do a capital project. That threshold under the old agreement was $300,000. That's since been raised to, says 800,000 on here, but I believe it was $1 million.
Yes.
It went up to $1 million in the new agreement. Under the old agreement, we didn't outline specifications for gate use. Under the new agreement, there are charges on gate per turn, which are capped at 5 turns for the airlines, and it requires the airlines to use the common use system that we've been implementing over the last year. Bag system charges, we weren't charging for baggage before. We are now charging for baggage. It's based on in-plane passenger at the moment. At 3 years, we're going to revisit that with the signatory airlines and see if we need to change that metric, in part because the outbound baggage handling system was struggling. But we believe at 3 years, we can reevaluate that and see if that's the right metric to use. And then we included new requirements on environmental liability and sustainability within that agreement. The reason why all of this is important is because it allowed us to change the way that we do business within the airport environment. We got a really good and fair deal from that agreement, but it also allowed us a little more flexibility in how we were able to use our resources, what we can do in terms of our capital program, and how we plan the airport over time, which is directly related to this conversation. So,
This is nothing unique. Other airports do. We didn't make up these new charges, right?
No, other airports do very similar things. In fact, we were actually one of the last airports that's been merged in this particular area.
Thank you.
Terry, there was big discussions in the past about how inexpensive our landing fees were and the opportunity relative to other Southern California airports. They have some sort of parity where they are. Where were we, and where does this new agreement take us in terms of landing fees?
Landing fees specifically, or the cost per plane passenger? Both. So the landing fees, Victoria would probably have a better idea on that than I would.
So, our landing fees have stayed the same. They were pretty much they were based off of our expenses for the year. And so they were, Daniel, like landing fees $1.
Something exchange.
Okay. And so with the new agreement, the way the landing fees work is they're recalculated based off of what our expenses are for the budgeted year. I don't have any other airports to compare to off the top of my head, but that's something that we can get to you at the next meeting if that's what y'all would like to see. We can put a presentation together so you can see the comparables. Do you want to go over the CPE?
Yeah, so as for the cost per plane passenger, meaning what the airline basically pays us for each passenger they bring to the airport or that fly to the facility. We had, under the residual agreement, probably the lowest CPE or one of the lowest CPEs in the state of California. That didn't increase too much with the new agreement. Basically, what we did is we added clarity to the process just to make sure the airlines understood where that money was coming from when we were generating those revenues. It did increase a little, but we're basically still lower than most comparable airports, middle of the range nationally, in terms of cost per airplane passenger. So the airlines, they did take a hit, not too much of a hit, it's still, affordable for them to fly.
So what is the rate?
668, I believe, is what we have this morning.
Up from $4 or something?
What was it before? It was 5 something.
No, it was closer to $6.
Like 695, I think.
And again, there was a debate in one of our meetings, one of our former commissioners who had a lot more experience with these landing fees and the claiming fees. There was a whole debate around why are we taking it to $10 or $12? Just in terms of strategy, what was your thinking behind keeping it so low?
So the more you charge the airlines, the more likely they are to take their airplanes somewhere else. And the idea is if we can keep the CPA low, we can keep airplanes flying in the class break. That's a simple version of that.
Commissioner Hall, you have a question?
Yes, you mentioned seven signatory airlines. Which ones are those? And I guess more importantly, which ones aren't covered by that? So the ones that aren't covered by that, what's the arrangement of those?
So the signatory carriers that we have here now are Alaska, American, Delta, United, Southwest, WestJet, and Air Canada. The remainder, Flair, JetBlue, Sun Country, and Allegiant, are not covered by that. And that is basically purely their business decision, whether they're covered by that or not. Oftentimes airlines don't sign a signatory agreement because they want the greatest ability to be able to lead a market and not have any repercussions in the market. But in terms of the metric and how it works, so for example, the non-signatory airlines don't have preferential gates assigned to them, so they don't have priority gates. They basically have to go wherever we put them. They are paying premium for uses of their resources, right? So they will have 25%, yeah, 25% more with other airlines for that flexibility to be able to pull out a market.
That's CPE.
That's just across the board for everything.
And are they paying the same landing fees that are signatory?
Yes.
Is that CPE included, or is that a separate charge?
I'm sorry, Sam.
Does the CPE include a charge for baggage, or is that a separate charge for baggage?
Baggage is a separate charge. That's got to be.
What is that? Is that something you are allowed to say?
For these lab.
These are all really good questions that I honestly wasn't prepared for. So, and I would love to use my computer, but then I'm gonna have to take over the screen. So that's why I asked for the second computer to come in.
So
If you,
we'll take that back.
yeah, we'll take that back. Yeah, just give me some time. I'll give you all the numbers.
So I'm hearing that the new agreement gives us lots more flexibility to make decisions and to deploy resources more efficiently. Are we making more money as a result of this?
We are making more money. Yes. So I think the biggest thing the new agreement accomplishes, we got to keep a lot more of our non-aeronautical revenues. The non-aeronautical revenues are those revenues that we charge for parking, concessions, additional ancillary fees, things like that. Usually we would true that up at the end of the year and send that back to the airlines to pay down their rates. We actually get to capture a lot more of those revenues now with the airports.
And that's where most of the net new revenue is coming from, correct?
A lot of it anyway, yes.
Questions?
Yes, who reviewed the agreement? Was it the city's attorney or is there an outside firm that reviewed the new agreement?
Yeah, the city's attorney was very involved in that process. We do that agreement.
Were they advised from outside or was there like an aviation related firm that assisted them in the negotiation or the approval? Or was it simply the city attorney?
I believe the city attorney is on the line and he can provide context for that.
And then, so we did have, Mr. Baird, I'm just gonna jump in really quickly. So to answer your question, the city/airport did work with a aviation financial consultant to help with the negotiations, as well as prepare the new airport use and lease agreement. And then, like Mr. Barrett mentioned, the agreement was reviewed along the way with the city attorney. So yes.
Is there anything you didn't get that you really wanted?
No? We got what we wanted.
So it landed where you thought it should.
Yes.
Other questions? Anyone on Zoom? Let's proceed.
All right, so now that we're going on the agreement, Victoria is going to cover the airport capital improvement program just a little bit and walk through what that looks like for us.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Victoria Carpenter, the Airport Administration Manager for Palm Springs International Airport. I'm just gonna go over some of the different funding that we received from the FAA to help fund our capital projects that we have at Palm Springs Airport. So, the most common airport funding that you will see will be from the Airport Capital Improvement Program through the FAA. So they provide us with two different types of funding. One is considered entitlement funding, which each year the airport gets approximately $4.1 million from the FAA to go towards projects which have a priority of airfield being the #1 priority, and then working its way outside of the airfield to the aprons, the gates, etc. The FAA will not fund any projects with entitlement funds that are for like rental cars, for revenue generating opportunities. So they will give us that entitlement funding based on us being a small hub airport, based on our employments that we have in the year and compared to the other airports within the nation. So since we're considered small hub, where we get entitlement funds, we get $4.1 million a year, that we have a 5-year ACIP program that we allocate those funds to for the years. There's also considered discretionary funding. So when I say that, that means it is a competitive grant of funds that we work with the FAA on. So we have to compete with other airports across the nation. And the Palm Springs Airport has not received discretionary funding in the past. But our direction forward is to apply for as much discretionary funding that we can get. And then hopefully we compete well and get it. It's pretty much up to the FAA to determine who gets it. There's also the bipartisan infrastructure law that granted 2 pots of funds. The AIG funding, which is called Airport Infrastructure Grants. They actually allocated for 5 years, a little bit over $5 million to Palm Springs Airport. So Palm Springs has not utilized any of those funds. We're currently at, we're banking $15 million right now. And we haven't used those funds. We do intend to use those funds for the baggage claim project. So you'll see that on the next slide there. And then with the BIL, there's also discretionary funding that we can compete for and then hopefully get funds for. And then there's also the ATP, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law ATP, that is a competitive process. So anytime there's any grant funding, Palm Springs Airport is applying for grant funding to help us fund our capital projects. So you'll see here on this next slide that it has the carry forward entitlement money that we received from the FAA from prior years. We received about $4.3 million this federal fiscal year. Federal fiscal year happens to be October 1 through September 30th, which is different from the city's fiscal year of July 1 through June 30th. So just a little caveat there. These are the existing projects that we have funded with entitlement funding, which is our taxiway rehabilitation, our hotspot study. Hotspot study means we're trying to find where there's problems on the airfield and try to mitigate that before we have problems. And then a wildlife hazard assessment, as well as our master planning process. So those are what are currently being funded through the AIP program. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the bipartisan infrastructure law, the BIL, from the prior years, we had about 10.3 million, and then we received another 5.5 million. And I can't see my screen, but we have a baggage claim project that I want to say I plugged in about $32 million there. And we're intending to utilize that full 25 million that we get over the 5 years towards that project. If there's any other funds that we can apply towards that project, we will, such as discretionary funding, we're gonna apply for that, we will apply every year. And then everything else that will not be funded will be funded locally from our airport capital project. So that's why you see a balance on there of 16 million, because we're gonna be receiving some more money over the next couple of years. Mr. Barrett?
Thank you. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the 5-year capital plan as it exists today. And this piggybacks off of last year's discussion about, I don't know if you all who were here remember, but there was a tactical plan and then a strategic plan. The tactical plan was basically envisioned to get us out of some of the quandaries we were involved with some of the capacity issues, increasing growth we were having, and then the strategic plan, which feeds more into the discussion we'll have a little bit later. So I think these. So last year, we surveyed the entire commission and asked them what the airport's priorities should be over the next 5 years. And the two highest priorities were to replace or improve aging infrastructure. There should be a second one there.
They both ranked.
Oh, okay. Replace or improve aging infrastructure. Those were the two highest priorities. The lowest priority being historical preservation. We'll dive into that a little bit later, but those were the priorities that this body gave us going forward. Next slide.
Sorry, replace or improve was both the highest and second highest.
That's correct.
Yeah,
I don't have the prior, that was based off of the votes from the commissioners, that's how it worked out.
Yeah,
Oh, because we had a number.
remember the exercise, pick 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, everyone picked 3. So it worked out that way.
Yeah.
So the infrastructure got the highest number of number ones, the highest number of number twos.
So progress on our 5-year capital plan, public parking electrification, we expect completion on that by Q4 of 2024.
And how many spaces?
80, 80 spaces, right, 40 machines, 80 spaces.
And will these be free, or will it be some sort of you use your credit card to pay for it?
We are working on a cost recovery plan for that, so it'll probably be some charge associated with that, just because there'll be an increased utility cost there.
Got it.
Sterile area shade structures, we anticipate those to be completed by Q4 2024. Taxiway whiskey and taxiway alpha 1 rehabilitation, those are at 90% design right now. We're expecting those to be completed at the end of 2024. Hotspot study, the study itself is actually nearly completed. Capturing that and making sure that we're executing on that study, we'll expect that to be completed fairly soon in 2024 as well.
Here, explain what that is. Awesome.
So hotspots are areas on the airfield, and actually Ryan can probably explain this better than I can, but they're essentially areas on the airfield where the geometry of the airfield is such that it creates a safety issue for airplanes. So where a taxiway leads right into a runway, those are areas we would want to fix.
And currently, we have 4 of them that we're trying to find a solution for to mitigate.
Okay, procure zero emission buses. We're hoping to have those under a FAA grant procured by 2024. Master plan, we'll be talking about the master plan a little bit later, but that should be completed by Q1 of 2025. Wildlife hazard assessment, same. Terminal optimization, common use, that's actually inaccurate, that should be completed in 2024 as well.
What is that?
That's the implementation of common use equipment at the gates.
Yes. Does everybody understand what that is?
Employee economy parking lots, Jeremy and I just had a meeting on that earlier today, and we're hoping to have some movement on that completion by 2024, and that would be creating an employee lot across the Cielo, across from the airport. Restroom renovations, we also had a meeting on that earlier today, and we hope to start designing those and have at least the Bono concourse and Fort Yard concourse restrooms renovated or designed and renovated by 2025. Baggage claim expansion design is currently underway, and we expect construction on that starting this summer with a completion date of Q4 2025. And then the outbound baggage handling system design is underway on that as well. That's under a different procurement method than the baggage claim expansion, so we're expecting completion on that by Q3 of 2026.
Yeah, can you tell me where the public access to Wi-Fi improvement program resides?
Yeah, so the IT director and the city manager and I are actually meeting on that on Monday, so that we can firm up a plan, and that plan will be presented to the commission.
Those funds have been approved by city council.
Yes.
So the money is there. Question is, can we get the IT person to move?
Yeah, so we're gonna nail down a plan on Monday, and I'll be presenting that plan later.
Broken somewhere in the calendar range that's here for these projects, because my recollection from prior commission meetings is there was enough passion around the commission, but there was at least equal interest in them to many of the projects in that project as there are on this sheet here.
Yeah, if the airport's priority is to get that accomplished, we are heavily reliant on other departments. Actually, we're gonna have a discussion about that a little bit later too, and their ability to move as quickly as possible.
Just need to know that the concessions project really depends on all the technology that the retail and the food and beverage concessions people are saying they're gonna bring, that's gonna make this a space age airport, all relies on super powerful internet signals and power. And so a lot of what they're doing, which should be done by the fall, can't really happen unless we step it up on the implementation of this. The good news is all of it's been approved, and now it's really collaborating with that department to see that it gets done.
We've been talking about the restroom renovation sometime. Is this schedule sort of the original schedule, or is that been pushed out?
No, that's not the original schedule. It has been pushed out, in part because we had some challenges with FAA environmental clearances, and in part because we had some challenges during the procurement phase.
Thanks.
Dollar amount of this 5-year capital budget, how much are you planning to spend for that?
Those are broken down by fiscal year. I do not have that on the slide, but Victoria would have that, and I believe did we include that there?
We did not include that in paragraph.
Okay, we can provide that to you as well, but it is phased out over multiple years.
And our paying for it is, how much of it is FAA grant expectations versus our operating?
That's broken down as well. Some of these actually aren't FAA projects. Some of these are done on airport revenues. So we'll have columns, once I provide that to you, columns identifying which are FAA projects.
Question to our consultants. The rental car facility design, Q4 26. How could we be 2 years away from the design, and this thing has been talked about for the last 5 years?
Yeah, it's a good question. The the counteract is essentially tied to the rest of the Town program. That's the way the FAA looks at it from an environmental standpoint is it's a program and we've got to environmentally review the entire program. So we've got to get through the CEQA process and then the NEPA process and then start with that.
So that's what adds its time.
Yes.
Second question. Jeremy. What would have to happen to get the shade structures done by the summer?
We're pushing as hard as we can. We've got a lot of permit issues back and forth, and so I think it's going on the 14th for approval. For city council, so we're getting closer.
Is there any way we can have this done for the summer?
We're pushing as hard as we can, and we're hoping, but it's gonna be a challenge once it gets designed and into permitting, and then it's kind of out of our hands, and once it goes into permitting, and so, we're making a lot of contacts with permitting and building department, so we're hoping for the best, and we'll try to push as hard as we can.
When you talk about the design of this project, is there any efficiencies if you're in design of this, to have whoever's doing the design, do the Measure J design for the shade structures in the front? Why would we do it? Why wouldn't we design it all at once, even if we have to do it over 2 years in terms of getting it built?
Well, because we didn't know about the Measure J project when we started this back in, probably when I got here in December, January, and Daniel had kind of started it going forward. I kind of took it over, and we didn't really know that we were doing that at this time. So it has taken that long to go back and forth with the vendor, iron out the cost, iron out the design, and going
So the
permitting
design
back and
exists.
forth.
So the design exists.
The design, no, has not started yet. The
So that's my
concept, we have the
question.
concept.
Okay, if you have a concept, why wouldn't we apply to the front and back if we're gonna design at the same time?
If we change it now, it's gonna just prolong the shade structure for the summer. Because now we'll have to go back to them and start talking about the outside, and we really need to have a consultant that really designs that for us. It was really meant for the courtyard and the other shade structure that we're putting on that didn't really necessarily need a separate design consultant, but the plan there is to go have one of our on-call design consultants design that for us and go through a different process than what we're doing for the courtyard shade.
Summer. Just saying.
Were there any other questions? We have a second slide on capital projects. Were there any other questions in the first slide? Okay. As for the second slide, so we're working on a new parking revenue system. You have a system that's that ABM is currently using, and the system's probably a decade or older. And we just need to update that equipment, that software, so that we can leverage newer technology, and create an enhanced customer experience, for the airport. We already talked about consolidated from our facility and the design of that, and mostly what we're waiting is some decisions on the master plan, before we launch into the design. Carpet replacement so the next section is Measure J funds, carpet replacement. We can mobilize on that fairly quickly, Q4 2024. Replace the water filling stations. That's another big project that we could probably do by the end of 2024, and even sooner, actually. Mid-century outdoor seating benches, those actually have to be designed. I believe we looked into this at one point, and those actually have to be designed out. So that's going to take a while to find someone to design it, to get those deployed. But we're projecting Q1 of 2025 for that. And then obviously the shade structures we just had the discussion about.
I'm sorry, I can't remember which commissioner proposed.
It was
The city.
Was it Gerald?
Yeah.
Didn't he propose a vendor who was ready to move on that, or could?
That
Well,
was my impression, that he had it.
yeah, the vendor, that's how he priced it out.
We would have to go through a procurement process.
Yeah.
And that would take about part of the year just to do that part of it. I mean, are there any other questions on the 5-year? Right, switching gears here, airport staffing. We're gonna touch on that just a little bit. I mentioned earlier that 4 years ago, the airport was trying to function with 48 FTEs, full-time people on staff. We've since increased that. And this slide is actually broken down by airport assigned FTEs versus fire. So we actually, for those commissioners who aren't as familiar, we do have a police and fire contingent on the airport that we fund. They still report to those chiefs. However, for all intents and purposes, they're counted for as airport personnel. So if you look at this slide, we have 74.5 airport personnel, 10 police FTEs, and then 9 fire department FTEs. Of those, we've had a number of recruitments over the last couple of months, and when we're doing the comparative analysis, I think we were able to fill maybe 4 or 5 positions for fiscal year 2022 in terms of our ability to fill positions. To date, since we went into the new budget year, we've been able to recruit and fill not only the 3 fire captain positions that were newly acquired, but also 12 positions for the airport. On the airport side, we still have 21 positions vacant, and those were newly budgeted positions. Now, you can imagine over the course of the year, we do have attrition. We have people retiring, people who leave for other positions, people who are medically unable to do their job, and so they leave all the time. So if you add that attrition rate into this, it's going to hover right around the 18 to 21 vacancy rate for a little while, probably another 4 or 5 months, and then you'll start to see that go down. But our HR specialist has been working night and day to try and get some of our positions filled on the airport side, and she's been doing a relatively good job with the resources that she's got. Most of those positions that are unfilled right now are in the maintenance department and on the admin side. So reporting to Jacob in the maintenance department and then Victoria in administration.
Okay, the top line number on the fire section, why is it 9 instead of 12?
Yeah, I think that's an error on that slide. So we had 9 frontline staff assigned, we added 3 fire captains. And so it should be a total of 11. We'll check that out. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about our challenges. I wanted to put this into pictures so that you could see some of what we deal with on a daily basis. And this isn't every area of the airport, but I wanted to give you a sense for particularly what capacity and growth and geometry constraints and spatial constraints are doing on airports. This is actually land side, and this is on a normal day. This isn't even on a peak day. We're seeing a lot of congestion on the land side on the roadways. And this is during one of our normal peaks. So if you come between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., or if you come between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., and even sometimes into the evening, this is what you would normally see out front on the loop road in front of the terminal. Obviously, as we continue to get busier, this is unsustainable because we're getting to the point where we're starting to gridlock traffic, and we need to address that particular concern. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Question on this curve. I was wondering the other day, why the taxi line starts and sort of goes backwards from the stand rather than kind of going forward from the stand? Because it seems like there's a little bit of unused space in front of the taxi stand.
That's
I'm sure there's a reason.
I don't know the reason because that predated me, but maybe Ramon does actually.
Yeah, so the space ahead of the taxi stand, can be utilized and has been utilized in the past. Because our overflow lot has begun to be utilized and it is utilized frequently now, other than just on the holidays. The shuttle parks just north of that. And so we may be able to get one cab in addition to that, and it breaks up the line a little bit. There's other times during the year where we can utilize more of that space to reduce some of the passenger confusion, the taxi starter starts on that point. That is actually where the crosswalk is. So it kind of eliminates a little bit of the confusion for the passenger.
Any other questions about that? Yes, please. So this is a little bit difficult to see, but this is also on a normal day, during one of our peaks in season. That's the ticketing lobby, in that photo, and if you look, there's a bunch of people standing there, and you would think they were queuing up for Alaska, but no, they're queuing up for WestJet, which is at the other end of the town. So that's on a day where WestJet is running, I think they were running three airplanes at the same time. That generally happens on days where we have one or more airlines that run dual or triple operations. So that happens when American does it, Delta does it. That just happened to be the day we captured that with WestJet. It's like sorry,
Real fast, am I correct in remembering that the airport as a facility has little or no control over when airlines choose to land and take off and how many come in at once?
You're 100% right on that. So they send them, we just have to figure out a way to accommodate them. The only time that I can influence that decision is if it causes an unsafe environment for the area.
Do we collect or can we collect any data to share with the corporate side of these airlines to demonstrate what some of the scheduling impacts are? Because I'm guessing that the employees on the ground here, they may not even be employees, they may just be contractors.
So that's a really good question. We actually do collect that data, and we do, when we meet with the airlines corporate offices, we do communicate that information to them. Now, on the airline side, what the network planners would tell you is, this is how our schedule is most efficient. So we can move it by 10 minutes here, 5 minutes there. But outside of that, there's not much we can do, especially if it's a hub and spoke airline. So if it's going to a hub like a Salt Lake or Seattle or something like that, that's going to be what works for their schedule.
So one thing that I think is maybe important to point out to them, you know, in business school, we study queue management, and generally with situations like this, what's happening is the check-in counters aren't processing the passengers quickly enough, and so the queue just spirals out of control because there are more people arriving, and they can process as they arrive.
That's a very, very good point. Management is part of this, how they leverage, depending on the airline, how they leverage technology can be a part of this. So there are a number of factors that feed into this, for sure.
Back to the question about contractors, just out of curiosity, my personal experience when I wind up in an airport where it's purely contractors that working for the airline, if the service plummets. Is there anything we can do to mitigate that, or do you think that's true even? I mean, I just maybe anecdotal. What's your thoughts on that?
It depends on the contractor. And in the case of the airlines, it really depends on some of the airlines' internal requirements as well and how they choose to do business. So sometimes that is the case, sometimes not. But generally speaking, yes, contractors tend to be paid lower than people who are staffed for that airline or for us, or whatever. So they're not as invested, and that does create customer experience challenge.
Are all airlines here using contractors?
I think all but one, I'm not mistaken.
We're talking about ground.
Ground handlers, yeah.
Southwest has their own.
No, they've gone in with contractors as well. Yeah, so Southwest Airlines and Alaska Airlines have their own employees to do the customer service check-in process. The rest of the work, the bag handling, the loading, the parking, all of those are contractors for those two air carriers. Everybody else are working with contractors, both ticket counter and customer service, and what's called below the wing, which is the rampers, the baggage loading and parking, cleaning as well.
So how do you influence quality of customer service if they're all contractors? Or is there any clout that airport staff has that would influence that in terms of how contractors behave with passengers?
Sometimes it's tied to our agreements with the airlines. You have to remember our previous agreement, didn't really define a lot in it. And it had been in place for 20 years. So just getting the airlines to do what we currently have was a challenge. To ask them to add additional things into that was nearly impossible. So I think over time, as we continue to have discussions with them, relative to the agreement, we can capture some of those things, metrics and how they do business. But for right now, we're heavily reliant on Daniel going to those stakeholders and saying, hey, look, here's the problem. I need to fix the problem.
I was gonna ask you, I mean, all this effort on branding and experience, what's your thought about this in terms of people we can't control, or they can't control? Or maybe they can.
Well, the airlines can't control. I mean, I used to work around that relied heavily on contractors. And it really relies on their customers really giving them feedback on that, so they can do that. And so we can have, when we get information, we have a share your experience link form on our website. So we share that information with the carrier and that back to them when we get something from the airlines. And then going forward, as far as like the biggest issue, like if you want to get like mainline their actual own staffing, is increasing our year-round service. Most of the seasonal airlines, they aren't here in the summer, and so they can't really hire full-time year-round employees for it to be laying them off. Their hiring price or struggle. Then also some of the other carriers that are here year-round, like they use the ground handling, which they below Wingport, because they also flex up and down greatly, like Delta does, and all the flights that connect with the airlines. So really, if our long-term goal is to get their own staff here for having better customer experience, it's also going to have to go with their service goals and trying to increase our summer service and summer flight options, which you guys think we're working.
So would you ever launch a campaign for contractors in terms of our brand, our experience, if there was some
Like an internal
initiative?
campaign or?
Yeah, some initiative around extraordinary customer experience that's related to our brand. Would you ever do that?
Yes, it's actually with the discussion about developing customer experience and program, it's actually something that would fall into that. I've actually been talking to some consultants to see how we go implementing a program. So getting quotes right now, some scopes of work to kind of see how we want to do something like this. So there are a number of airports that are putting in customer experience training, or like a site badge training, and then we're doing like award programs or reward programs for employees. Like say they get positive comments or whatever, and they get entered in a raffle for something or whatever. And so there's I'm looking at other airports what they're doing, and seeing what we're not able to implement here.
Maybe David, do you have any comments in terms of just your experience with contractors?
No, I have nothing more to add, thank you.
Do contractors work across carriers here? Or
Yes.
Some do, yeah.
Yes.
Even customer service, like any kind of people.
Customer service, I'm not sure. So you have a master contractor. So say, for example, I'll use TTS. They may have 3 airlines, and they potentially are able to swap between those 3 airlines on the service. Usually you'll see that on the ramp side, not so much on the customer service side, each airline on the customer service side.
So there's customer service people that are contractors, and then there's the ramp lights, the ramp people. Are they the same contractor?
They would be managed by the same contractor, yes. And I think we have 3 contractors here now.
For Unify, UGE, HES, and WIS.
So,
So maybe we could launch the new sessions. But I don't wish to. We launched the new concessions, we consider something like that game.
Yeah, Harry's actually got, and for fiscal year, next fiscal year, starting July 1, should customer experience, FTEs to start getting working together. So I get, all the quotes from our consultants that help basically, I'm trying to develop a game plan from, day one start here with writing job description and training for the people who be doing CS and how they would train other people, kind of rolling out the whole program and how we expand it over time. My goal, of course, that's kind of a moving target because sometimes things go slower than we anticipate. Like everything ready to go with the start of next fiscal year, but that's also going to depend on how soon we can get things like the position for HR and get them hired and them onboarded and all of those different things. So once we have a contractor selected, we can probably develop a timeline and kind of start going from there. That's right. We need to talk to HR on hiring and all that. So.
Any other questions before I have this slide? So this slide is just another representation of what we're seeing on a normal day, even every day. But this is behind the ticket counters as you check in for your flight, and has to do with baggage. Obviously, you can see that the agents are working in a very tight space back there, trying to figure out how to get baggage off the line. And this is just on a normal day. This doesn't even include the challenges we were having 2 years ago with the baggage system. So if you're here sometime in February, or you may even see it today, if you take a walk downstairs during one of our peaks, this is what you would normally see behind the counter. And one of the reasons we're working on that without baggage handling system.
Wondering, who actually is loading these bags onto the belt? Are there separate like muscle staff that are running back and forth and loading them on?
For most of the airlines, it's going to be the customer service agent, and that's why it's part of the reason they're invested in this process, is because they're seeing a lot of injuries on their staff as a result. I think Alaska is the only one that hires separate people to manage their baggage, looking at their baggage there.
And I guess it's probably just hysterical that we don't have, like most airports, you load your bag onto the conveyor belt and it sends it onto the main belt.
Yeah, that was not designed into this system. So those were just a couple of photos. There were additional areas there that we see challenges in the concessions program, for example, which we're working on, but the lines there can be a little lengthy sometimes with our peaks. On the ramp side, if you were to look at the Bono Concourse specifically, we're very space constrained at the Bono Concourse in terms of being able to accommodate not only the aircraft, but also the ground service equipment, fueling equipment, things of that nature. It's a little kind of the ramp side. So there's definitely need to address some of those issues as well. In terms of the organization, we've got a couple of challenges as well. The first being just decentralized department functions. So for those of you who aren't familiar, there are a couple of functions within the airport that actually don't report to me. Human resources being one of them, IT being another, procurement being one, and permitting and delivery another. And I should also add engineering as well. At least currently, we've got an engineer assigned to the city engineering department. The challenge that creates for us is we have two very different missions, right? So, and this isn't distinct to just Palm Springs. This is actually a municipal government challenge where we have governments that run airports. But on the one side of things, you've got a city that says, these are the rules, this is the box that we play in, this is how we do business. And then you have the airport over here, which is responding to market conditions and airline decisions and passenger flow. And so what happens is, anytime we need to get things done on the airport side, there tends to be a lot of bureaucracy, resistant things that are slow to change, because on the city side or the city hall side, they don't necessarily understand the operational demands that come with a 24/7 airport that can flex up and down. And you see that often in our capital planning. Some of the projects actually that we just mentioned earlier, we're wondering why it's taking 2 or 3 years to get through some of those projects. We can absolutely project manage that in a year here in the airport less. But getting it through the process on the city side tends to be a challenge for us. So these 4 departments specifically, we're trying to work through some process changes with those. On the human resources side, one of the challenges that we tend to run into is that human resources likes to keep job descriptions consistent across the organization. And what works for an engineer or a planner in the job description on the city side may not necessarily work in aviation planning. So when I get an aviation planner in, like I recently did, and I tell her to go out and play with airspace, she's looking at me like I'm crazy. What is it? What are you talking about airspace? I deal in environmental, I deal in civil. What is airspace? Information technology. The challenge is understanding the priorities, really. What impacts an airline versus what impacts the airport, and what we can manage and what's going to lose us money. That's a challenge for us. The procurement side, procurement does a really, really good job of getting our RFPs and our bids and things out there. But is having to be forced to work within the constraints of the other city lines of business as they're trying to get some of their projects done as well. So these are some of the challenges that we're running into when I say centralized department function. Any questions about that?
So when you talk to the city about some of your challenges, is the city manager like providing solutions, or is there any kind of, or is it just, sorry, that's the way it is?
No, I think Scott's been very much an advocate for let's try and solve problems where we can, let's find efficiencies where we can, but you also run into situations where you need to garner support at the city council level, or there may be reasons, particularly in the case of procurement, for example, permitting, where the city would prefer to keep the process as it is. So just kind of really, it's case specific, I guess.
So okay, so we asked, can we have our own HR team funded by us
Those
to help
questions,
with recruitment?
yeah, those questions have come up before. On the HR side, we actually were successful with an HR specialist. We got that approved in the last fiscal year budget, with this current fiscal year budget. Some of the other departments, it's a little more of a heavy lift to make that happen.
I think it's something we should have a conversation about. You know, when you start to get underneath some of these issues, and we know the city is like out of their minds on this permitting process, you know, new software that is taking way too much time for people to get used to, and every contractor in the city that just talks about what's going on in the permitting department. You know, some of that may not, you know, that's just that may be just too big an ask. But in areas of HR and, you know, David's shoot about IT, you know, I think there's a conversation that we could have to say, are there efficiencies? We're running an airport, we're not running a city. Are there efficiencies we can explore? I'm wondering that, you know, out of this long-term or long-range planning process, maybe we have a whole section around the efficiencies in the airport, building on some of these ideas, so that we can have that conversation, because I think Scott would be open to it. And I know that if I'm running human resources across the street, I want to control it all. I get all that, right? Inconsistencies that you get when you're the boss, you're showing it. But maybe in terms of our long-term plan, we can position some of these issues to see while we're doing all the rest of this stuff, that we can look at the processes here and reporting relationships and that kind of thing. Because, you know, our never-ending struggle with IT, we know what that's about, you know, and then there's a group that runs it and they want to do it their way, and so we wait. So yeah, something to think about in terms of our work.
As that's examining, I think that we can identify, I think all this, that you can identify examples of airports that have evolved in this way. I mean, the first thing that this is not an uncommon problem, but if we could have exemplars of how that has been navigated effectively with municipal governments, and that would be, I think, an interesting inspiration for us to draw on.
It's a good idea.
Any other comments on some of these challenges?
Yeah, the other three, prolonged hiring process, I mean, again, that ties back to some of the city capacity. To be able to do some of these things, the typical hiring process for us is about 6 months. Get someone on board from end to end. So that can be a challenge. Recruitment of contractors, this is actually a huge one, that not only impacts the airport, but also impacts some of our tenants. And we're running into the specific challenge actually with the concessions program, where we don't have enough local talent or enough businesses that understand the airport or that see the value in working in an airport that can come out and do the work that we need sometimes for the airport. So when it comes to construction, IT projects, things of that nature, there isn't enough local here in the valley to be able to draw from to execute some of these things, and that becomes a challenge for us in the bidding process. And then space constraints, I mean, if you walk around this report, it's pretty obvious that we've got some space challenges related to the campus itself. Questions have been said?
All good? Any questions? Questions on Zoom?
Now, all that said, we walked you through where we were, where we are, and what we're thinking. Is there any feedback in addition to what we've discussed for the airport staff that we need to take back and look at?
Hey, Harry, it's Todd. And maybe there's not a real good answer to this, but as I think about the slides where we talked about customer service and the challenges we have with airlines and using contractors, do we know, are there any shining examples of airports, maybe same size or scope? Perhaps seasonality is one of our outliers. Any airports that are doing it really well that have sort of nailed this challenge that we could look to? And I don't know if there's an answer, but I'm just simply throwing it out there.
I don't have an answer for you specifically. I do know that there are airports that have created some efficiency, some of that by bringing it in-house, but that was a negotiation with the airlines. Some airports use one master ground concessionaire. The airlines have done a really good job about consolidating their business models and working across airlines to consolidate their ground operations. So that's helped in some respects, but we can certainly take a look around and see if there are examples of that unless Ryan knows.
I would just add, Harry, that it's a function of the space constraint. The photos you showed, the ticket counters don't have enough depth. And then you just literally don't have enough linear feet of ticket counter to accommodate 13 airplanes. We look at Madison, Wisconsin, which is another airport that has a couple of annual appointments, but they only have 4 airlines, the 4 big airlines. So they're sharing a similar amount of linear feet of ticket counter amongst 4 airlines. You're trying to divide it by 13 airlines. And so no matter how efficiently the ground contractors work, you're still gonna have, you can do as much management as you possibly can, but if you can't get enough linear feet of ticket counter, and that's what the terminal planning we're doing is trying to address. But there's only so much efficiency you can gain in queue management when you don't have a lot of space that you need for the airlines.
And it lives on a razor's edge, and when you cross that line between processing people in a timely fashion and then just being a little bit too late in processing, the queue just, quickly spirals out of control and creates that sort of long line that you see where it seems like it will never end.
You know, this picture, this person, I don't know, this agent, if she's a contractor or an employee, but she's processing people faster than the baggage can actually handle. She's just throwing it behind her, so she's doing her job really fast. Faster than the system can actually handle, so.
Yeah, and that's what you would see probably throughout continuing to ensure is that most of the agents in process fairly quickly, it's the getting the baggage off the line, that's the challenge. And Daniel said he can answer your question, Commissioner Burke.
Yeah, hey Todd, so ACI, Airports Council International, the agency that awarded us the best airport website award. They also do customer experience program awards too. So I'm looking at who are the task winners there, and they're small hub airports, which of course is what we are. This last year's winner was 12th International Airport in Oklahoma, which I used to work at the airport. If you guys don't know, when they're marketing and air service at the time. And I actually know the folks for many years who've run their customer experience program, and I've been talking to them as I've been doing my research to develop one here. So there are other airports we can look to get information from and see what they're doing, and then how we can use that to improve Palm Springs.
Super, I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me comment.
One comment about agents, contractors, they don't really feel like they belong to the airport they're working, or the airline they're working with. So maybe as an we could actually make them feel more like they're an airport employee. So I don't know if you guys have, how you treat our employees here. Maybe we can start treating the people that work for the airlines similar, so they have a sense of belonging somewhere.
That's a good idea.
It's good feedback. And
Looking at the use agreement and things like that, is there? Actually, this is the best idea. Is there any way to, make more consistent the contractors that the various airlines use? I'm not sure what I'm coming here. The reality is that the passenger experience with checking in and their luggage and what have you is a reflection of how people look at Palm Springs Airport itself, even though we're not the airline. So of course, the two experiences are related. And I'm just wondering whether it's through the use agreement or something, whether we can find a way, we've been talking about that, to try to find a way to unify those things so that whether it's the contractors who say, we're all part of one airport here, we've all got one goal, because if you make the airport look good, you make the airline underneath it look good, or vice versa. Is there some way of trying to unify that experience?
I think there is. I think there are opportunities for that. I think, starting with Daniel's mission, vision, and values, that he, started with earlier this year, that's an area that we can pick up on and start marketing a little bit better internally, to the airlines, letting them know where we stand as a report and what our expectations are. I think in the strategic business planning process, that's another area. So as we start to embark on that in the 2024 calendar year, that's an area where we can focus a little more on customer experience and making sure that our business partners are aligned with where the airport is. And then certainly as we continue our relationships with those stakeholders, and we update their agreements, those are opportunities to do that as well. So we did that in the last AU, not so much with customer experience, but with sustainability and environmental concerns, and basically incorporating that into the agreement. So they understood that that was a focus area for us. So I think there are opportunities to capture that. We just need to identify those.
Please. You mentioned classification. We're a small hub with our growth plan. Does that take us to like a 30 days, whatever? Is that gonna potentially bump up to another classification, or do we stay small throughout this?
That is going to be completely dependent on what happens with the airlines, whether they continue to send airplanes here, whether we continue to see the same level of growth that we've been seeing year over year. And it's really in comparison to other airports across the nation, right? But in general, if you were to ask me that question and allow me to give my opinion on it, we're headed in that direction where we're potentially going to be reclassified.
What's the next level up?
So airports are split into small, medium, and large hub airports. That has an impact mostly with the level of federal funding that we receive on the ability to operate. Our finance.
Yeah, and Harry, it's based on national employments. Currently to get to medium hub status, The smallest medium hub is currently Reno at about 2.2 million employments, so 4.5 million total passengers. So your forecasts do have you within the 20-year plan period, and I can find out what you're becoming a medium hub.
Yeah. And then, sorry, along with mine, as we're consulting with other airports and so forth, should we be thinking about consulting more medium level, rather than not, I mean, just around limiting ourselves, I guess.
Yeah, so we're already doing that.
Okay.
Both on the FAA and TSA side. I think kind of the last leg of that tripod is doing it internally with the airport itself and with the staff.
Clarifying the case of the PSP, I mean, I always thought of this hub and spoke, meaning the big. I mean, are we considered a hub, and is there a different nomenclature of that terminology for small airports?
Well, there's the common use language and then there's the FAA definition language. And so I'm gonna defer to Ryan because I'll screw this up all day.
Yeah, it is confusing. The small hub, large hub, medium hub is mostly FAA definition for funding purposes, for many passengers or terminal processes, but connecting passengers mostly happen in large hubs. So
All good? So just one last question, then we're gonna take a break, we're right on time. This strategic planning process that will be completed in December. Are you going to share this along the way?
Yes.
So we'll see this and be able to influence this in all of it.
Right, my plan is at least on a quarterly basis, if not more frequently, to bring it back to the commission and have discussions about it.
Wants to give everyone a chance to provide input on this, the goals, the objectives, the strategies along the way, instead of waiting until the end of the year like we're doing for this meeting. Make sense? Okay. Thank you for that. Let's take a 10-minute break. We're right at time. And restrooms are down the hall. Need more water? Ask. And we'll start at 20 minutes of 3 and talk about our future. Christina, ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Let's go. Who's gonna drive who's driving this part?
So I'll just do the lead in and then we'll hand it off to Ryan. So the second part of this meeting is envisioned to focus specifically on the long-term path of development and where we're heading. The idea was that I provide context in the first part for where we were, what challenges we had, what we were able to do and what we were not able to do, those kind of things. And then we would talk in this part about what the master plan working with and what we've been trying to do over the last year. So for those of you who are newer, we actually do have a working group who's been guiding the master plan process. And that's comprised of airport staff, city staff, and then 4 airport commissioners, a couple who are in the room today. But we're at the point in the master planning process where we need to start making some decisions, recommendations to the city council, so that we can get it documented on paper for the FAA. So this is one of those decisions with the terminal planning and landside planning at the airport. So I'm going to turn this over to Ryan Hayes. He's going to kind of give some background, additional background, and then we have some discussion that we need to have about terminal development.
great, thank you, Harry. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I think I speak for my whole master plan team when I say it's been really fun to work on this. Airport staff has been super supportive. The community has been supportive. A lot of you, I know, attended the September open house. I think we had a couple hundred attendees. We had to get more chairs. That's all I had. So it's been fun to have that level of community engagement, speak to how important this airport is to the valley and to the city of Palm Springs. I've got about 30 slides that brief you on where we've been and where we are currently. A lot of it is information you've already seen. I'll try to go through that information a little bit quick. I do have some new information. We've taken the two alternatives on the terminal side and we have analyzed them in more detail. We have broken them into phases of potential construction with costs per phase, which I think are very important numbers. We've also estimated how long it might take to go from the completion of a master plan to cutting a ribbon on a terminal. In both alternatives, which I think is interesting information. That's actually a new slide that Harry and I added yesterday. So Christina wanted me to mention that slide is new and we can share it with you if you would like to add it to your packet. So that's what we plan to do today. I guess any questions before we start?
Let's go.
Harry mentioned a little bit about the role of the working group versus the role of the commission. The role of the working group has really been to serve as a sounding board to the consultant team and to airport staff as we work through this. They've been reading our chapters as we produce them. They've been reviewing our recommendations and we've been holding meetings. We've had 3 meetings of this body so far, out of a total of 5. So we've got another one scheduled for January. And then a 5th meeting likely in March or April.
We could just remind who's the board, who's on it, who's on the working committee. I'm on it, Kevin's on it,
Chairman Gata, and then,
Former Commissioner Ken Hendrick.
and Ken Hendrick is on it. The 4 of us have been working on this. Go ahead.
Yeah, and just, so separate from that, what this commission, what your role really is of course, attend the public outreach meetings. If you're willing to be identified as a commission member, we're happy to make you a name tag. If you didn't go to the last one, we are gonna have another one in either March or April.
But we have to be careful not having it one.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah,
Not all of us can show up.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Okay, well,
typically the chair and the vice chair.
the chair and the vice chair. Okay, thank you for that clarification. And then obviously, as Harry said, making recommendations to the city council is a role of this group. The master plan process is.
David?
In terms of the participation in that role, I understand the issues around not having a quorum. Is there any reason that can't be on Palm Springs government TV when it's being done live, so others of us can watch these?
yeah, I mean, I think the logistics of it is the larger issue, but we can look into it, so.
Yeah, I think that would be the rest of the commission, so we can all just abide by those rules.
Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. The planning process, we've shown you this chart before. We break it into these 4 phases. We are currently in the phase 3, the solutions phase. We're coming up with alternatives to solve the airport's space constraint problems, basically. We do need a decision by this group and by the city council to move forward from column 3 into column 4, which is the implementation phase. So in that phase, we're going to be doing detailed financial planning, putting the terminal concept onto an airport layout plan for the FAA to review. And we need that decision in order to move forward with the environmental analysis that's required by the California Environmental Quality Act, often referred to as CEQA. So that's the process, the schedule. We put on this Gantt chart. This was a schedule we developed at the very beginning of the project that had us substantially complete in March of 2024. We're mostly tracking on that. And again, that's the phase where we combine the airfield planning with the terminal planning and we come up with a concept for the entire airport. We take that concept and we break it into a list of projects. We talked in the first half of the meeting about the 5-year plan, the 5-year capital plan. This master plan is going to result in a 20-year capital plan. So there's very much a similar exercise in what you all are going through right now, where you're trying to prioritize what are the most important projects in the next 5 years. We're looking at what are the most important projects in the full 20 years for this airport. So specific to the terminal planning, we started with 4 initial terminal area alternatives. If you recall, those we define those in terms of how much they reuse or don't reuse existing facilities. So alternatives 1A and 1B were defined as maximum reuse. They reuse the Wexler head house. Head house is kind of a common term in terminal planning for the area that accommodates TSA, check-in, and baggage claim. So 1A and 1B reuse the Wexler head house and the Bono concourse. Approach 2 only reuses the Wexler terminal. It builds new concourses and does not reuse Bono. And then approach 3 on the right side of the slide is basically a brand new terminal, replacement terminal where the Wexler building that we're sitting in is repurposed. We went through an initial screening on these, shared it with the working group, and they asked us to focus our efforts on alternatives 1A and 3, so both ends of the slide here. And we went through a refined terminal area alternatives analysis on specifically those 2. So trying to think of the most simple titles for these. So 1A is essentially renovate this building and expand. And alternative 3 is essentially replace all terminal facilities on the south side of the terminal envelope. I think is the simplest way to describe the difference between the 2. So these next 2 slides show the entire, keep in mind, this is the entire 20-year build out. This Harry's referred to it as a 50-year master plan, which may be more accurate. 34 gates are shown on this drawing, as well as remain overnight aircraft parking stands. This probably is a post 20-year planning period. It obviously depends on how fast employments grow and how fast airlines add flights, but on both of these full build alternatives, we essentially looked at this triangle envelope and built it out. This is pretty much fully built out. There's not any space left to put aircraft or parking. This is 1A. You can see Wexler and Bono and the airport's front door stays the same. In 1A, the Conrack is the orange rectangle just to the north of the terminal, plan left. Essentially there's 2 new concourses, a concourse north of the terminal and a concourse that replaces the regional jet concourse. That's the concept in alternative 1A. The concept in alternative 3 then is replace. So the major difference here is Wexler is no longer used as the front door of the airport. The purple shaded shape is essentially a new head house. So the new PSA screening, new ticketing, and baggage handling, as well as new baggage claim. The Conrack, the consolidated rental car parking deck, then is this, again, this rectangle that it basically takes up the entire existing public parking lot. And alternative 3. So that's the full build look at it. But I'd like us more to focus today a little bit on phase 1, because phase 1, we figured out what we think you might build in phase 1 of both of these options and a cost estimate on that. So, but before I get to that, Harry wanted me to share a little bit about both the tenant outreach that we did, as well as the public outreach that we did. So we had tenant stakeholder meetings at the beginning of the project last spring. We had a follow-up meeting with airlines and TSA and car rentals in November. Most of the tenants did not indicate a preference for 1A or 3. Alaska did state that they prefer 1A. Most of the folks we met with are people who work and live in this building, and their questions were focused on how are we going to continue to operate while you build all this. So a lot of phasing questions, a lot of timeline questions from the tenants.
Can you tell us why Alaska decided to opine on this?
That's a good question. I don't know. I presume they're concerned about their cost, what the cost increase would be. We are on the airport side looking at it from the perspective of more, we need to address the space issues, the efficiency issues, customer experience issues. And yes, cost needs to be a factor in that, but we're gonna focus on the issues and then deal with cost as we go. And I think Alaska's concerned about their security. I think if we were to ask the other airlines to weigh in, they probably would have. But Alaska was just very vocal.
And where are they in the hierarchy of size and?
That's a very good question. So they were our largest carrier up until this year. Southwest is overtaken.
So they're number two.
Number 2 or number 3, I think American might be first.
This is just some of the additional feedback we heard from stakeholders. None of this is new to you. The things that people like about this terminal are the quaintness, the Palm Springs charm, the ease of use, how quickly you can get from your front door to the gate. The mountain views, the unique amount of indoor-outdoor space that you don't see at other terminals around the country. So a lot of that was taken into consideration by the planning and architect team as we came up with these concepts. On the public outreach and public feedback side, I mentioned the open house we had in September. We just have some stats from our public outreach partner about how we advertised for it. I feel like we got the message out to the community, and that was proven by how many folks showed up. We also have a website. If you're not familiar, it's palmspringsairportmasterplan.com. All of the information that we have produced, both working papers and slideshows, as well as frequently asked questions are on the website. These are some stats from the public involvement webpage. The display boards were downloaded 400 times. We had 912 total site users, 875 that had never visited the site before September. So I think we did a really good job of driving folks to the website and advertising. We had a comment period that lasted from September 19 to September 27, where we asked people to share their feedback about the alternatives, the 4 terminal concept alternatives. We had 500 people engaged with that, and 42 surveys returned, so 8% of the folks that engaged told us which terminal concept they preferred. I've thrown some of the quotes onto these sticky notes. This is specific to alternative 1A, which is the repurpose Wexler and Bono alternative. There are some concerns about the Conrack, particularly because the Conrack could be up to 4 to 5 stories tall. There were folks who thought this seemed to be the quickest and cheapest alternative. There were also comments on the other side that this alternative is restricted because you're trying to reuse facilities that, particularly the Wexler building, was built in the 60s. Let's see other comments. 1A doesn't allow for departing or arriving passengers to journey through or maybe that's supposed to be does allow for them to journey through the courtyard. The best option, because this preserves the Bono concourse. There's some definite folks in the community that like the way the Bono concourse works. A good option that keeps Wexler at the focal point, seemingly economical option. On the feedback on alternative 3, some folks really like this because it really reimagines the airport from the ground up, allows you to build all your facilities new with new technology, which could be advantageous to your passengers. A lot of folks thought not being constrained by using existing buildings was a positive. A lot of folks thought it was their least favorite alternative because it doesn't use the Wexler building and it changes the front door of the airport. See what else. There were comments about constructability. Alternative 3 could be built while you operate all your current facilities in place. Some of that was related to feedback. So this isn't every single comment we have, but I tried to pull as much flavor of my comments as I could. What I really want to show you is these phasing plans, and we've also done renderings to allow you to visualize. So there's some architectural renderings. Obviously, these terminal improvements are not designed, so we don't know exactly what they're going to look like, but we did scale them in 3 dimensions to help you kind of visualize the impact to the terminal area, if you will. So alternative 1A, the first phase of this is really focused on building to the north. So the Conrack, a northern concourse that essentially adds 7 new gates and potentially also adds a FIS, a federal inspection facility, so you could potentially have international flights that clear customs here in Palm Springs as opposed to their departing airport. So everything really gets all the from a constructability standpoint, there would be some line at baggage claim, essentially, or at the north side of the courtyard, where you would put up fences and you build all of this to the north while you continue to operate your existing gates. That's one of the advantages. The other advantage of 1A is it's cheaper than alternative 3. So we estimate this at about 900 million. 350 million of that is the Conrack, which has its own dedicated funding sources related to rental car charges. So about 550 million would be the terminal improvements that essentially get you 7 new gates once you build it. Then phase 2 of this alternative basically takes the regional jet concourse and turns it into a narrow body concourse to the south. So there's not a huge net increase in gates in phase 2 because you're basically taking these walkout gates and turning them into jet bridge contact gates. And then phases 3 and 4 would just continue to extend that southern concourse basically out into the taxiway until you hit 34 total units.
Hey, Ryan.
Yes.
Hey, everyone. My name is Justin Anderson. I work with Ryan as a terminal planner on the team. Although I do want to point out that although in phase 2, the count is stays flat compared to phase 1, all the gates are can accommodate your mainline aircraft, which is a pretty big benefit compared to what the regional concourse currently offers now. So as airlines begin to retire those smaller regional jets and upgauge to mainline, those gates in the phase 2 in that new concourse will be able to accommodate those larger aircraft.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Justin, and apologies for not introducing you. I appreciate you joining. Justin's here to help answer questions. He's a terminal planner with Mead & Hunt and actively involved in the development of these concepts.
Ryan, last question, how many gates are there here?
At full build out, there are 34, Justin?
Yeah, 34. So yeah, when we did the initial program, we had a range in the ultimate phase of between 30 to 32 gates. So we did maximize the site here and added 34. Now, if those full 34 are needed, that's in a 20-year plan. So this will be reevaluated when we get to that point. But what's shown here is 34 gates.
Yeah, do those 34 include the RON that are out there, or is that not?
They do not include the RON. Those are just extra aircraft parking. Essentially, they park an aircraft there, it sits overnight, and they tow it back to the gate when it's needed.
So Ryan, phase 1.
Yes.
If we landed on this option, how fast could we get that bid?
Yeah, I have a slide that shows this. So the major steps following the master plan are environmental. In addition to the California Environmental Quality Act, there has to be an analysis under the National Environmental Policy Act. So you've got environmental for a year or a year and a half. You've got a program definition, which is an architectural exercise that defines what's gonna be designed, and then there's actual architectural design, and then there's construction and commissioning. So there's kind of four main steps. I did run this by the architects. They thought best case scenario, probably 3.5 years from finish of the master plan to ribbon cutting on phase 1 of 1A.
And this would get us the international capability within 3.5 years if we decided to go in this direction.
Correct.
Ryan, can I ask a question on following what Kevin just mentioned? So as I'm looking at this slide at the very bottom, it says 25 narrow body. Does this plan not allow for any wide body aircraft at the International Concourse?
Yeah, that's a good question. Justin, you want to field that?
Yeah, so you'll see 2 wide body aircraft, those that are parked there at say a 747, that's 2 747s that are parked there. So when those are parked there, those 4 narrow body gates are unoccupied and replaced with 2 wide bodies. So it's in our industry, it's called a MARS, a multiple aircraft stand system. But yeah, those 2 of those gates will be capable to have wide body service.
Wonderful, thank you.
Brian, I also know that one of the other concerns was the size of the Conrack. Is it still 5 stories?
It is 5 stories, and the reason it's 5 stories, it's envisioned to be an all encompassing facility. So it encompasses the rental cars ready return lot. It encompasses their maintenance and wash facilities, and encompasses their storage of cars.
And Ryan, is that 5 stories all above ground, or is there any consideration for subterranean levels?
It is all above ground, and our cost estimates assume it's above ground. You could go lower, it just would be more expensive. We can quantify that. But we haven't done that yet.
Because we had talked about taking it to 3 stories to subterranean.
Yeah,
Yeah, could it be possible that it's possible? We'd see what it would cost to do it.
absolutely.
All right.
It's also possible to have less stories if you have some of those functions continue to operate outside of the Conrack. So if you continue to have wash and maintenance bays that aren't in the Conrack, maybe you could come down a little.
But brings a question. I drove by that. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's over there where all they wash the cars. What happens to that land?
That's part of the master plan. Scope is to make some recommendations for how you might repurpose those areas.
Do you have a suggestion of just brainstorm of how we use that out of those areas?
We do, it depends on whether what signature FBO moves across the runways or not. If they stay on this side, there's definitely ways to repurpose that for their use.
So private sheds could use it.
Yes.
So that's a good term.
Exactly. So
Ryan, sorry, one more point to make on phase 1. As we get into the later phases and then ultimately the alternative 3. So phase 1, right off the bat, Ryan said 3 years to the ribbon cutting. When we started this master plan, specifically with the terminal, the biggest issue was gate capacity. And we found that out through talking with the tenants and surveying them. They needed more gates, specifically in that springtime, that spring peak. Phase 1, right off the bat, gets you those 7 additional gates and satisfies that. Additionally, like Ryan said, the FIS2, that is included in the phase 1 and gives you that international capability as well. So I just want to kind of hone in on those 2 details as we also introduce alternative 3 here later on.
thank you, Justin. So these are the renderings that Gensler produced. I don't want to take credit for these. These are our architectural partner at Gensler who produced these. I think they did a really nice job helping you visualize at least the massing, particularly of the Conrack. You can see on the right side of the slide where the air traffic control tower, which is one of the tallest facilities in Palm Springs, is located, and the Conrack is about halfway up the tower.
I know the big question we had was, when you walk out the front door, are you overwhelmed by the Conrack? When you look at this, it seems like it's sufficiently to the right or to the north that it would not severely impact the WOW view.
Yeah.
Is that where you've landed on this too?
I think so too, and so this is the northeast view. The next one shows it at the southwest view, which is completely flipped. And particularly the setback, to that point from El Cielo. The architect has maintained some space for some green space in between the road and the Conrack, which I think is obvious from this viewpoint. Certainly coming out of the front door of Wexler and turning to the north, it will be overwhelming, but looking down top-ish, less overwhelming.
Good.
And I have a question. Maybe this, rendering, does the TSA process move out of the Wexler or central section?
Good question. The TSA, could potentially be expanded in phase one, maybe with some bump out of the, square footage of Wexler. Right, long term, it's included in this extended Wexler head house that extends to the south. So I don't know if you can see this kind of yellow bump out. But the idea is there's enough space there to put in long linear security screening checkpoints that process passengers fast.
Commissioner Behrman, you have a question, and then Commissioner Feldman, sorry, Commissioner Whiteman.
Just a quick follow-up. So then when they exit TSA, they enter the left courtyard and the right courtyard before going to the gates?
I think that's right, yes. That's a detail to be figured out in the design, but yes.
First question is real quick. USO is going to be incorporated into the terminal?
Correct.
Okay, and secondly, what happens to displaced FBOs? Or are there displaced FBOs?
There is a displaced FBO. The Conrack takes up the apron and the terminal area for signature, one of the two FBOs. And so that's something we're analyzing the master plan right now. If there's space to shoehorn them in on the west side, or if we need them to relocate to the side.
Excuse me one second. This is the first time I've heard this. USO would be incorporated into this plan.
Yes, so they'd have some lounge space. Justin, I don't know if you know how many square footage we had allocated for USO.
So that is included in the plan, and that can be on. There's some airports that have it pre-security, and then also some that also have it post-security as well. So, but that program is worked into a passenger amenity line item in our program.
Commissioner Feldman was next, and then we'll do Commissioner Bond.
Okay, so I'm looking at this tiny little Kirk Douglas Way. And there's really no visual difference between the way it is today and the way it appears here. How many enplanements is this concept being built for?
Are you specifically talking about phase one or the whole building?
Yeah.
Yeah. Justin, do you know?
Yeah. So our ultimate build out is planned for 6.5 million annual passengers. So that equates to roughly about 3.25 million annual employments. And that was on the higher growth of our forecast curve. And it's good to provide that type of program just to make sure that the program fits into this site. But to answer your question, 3.25 million annual employments. So this that first phase, we looked at to accommodate up to 4.8 million annual passengers, which is about 2.4 million annual employments.
I'm not a traffic engineer, never have been, never will be, but we're proposing to essentially double or 50% higher, whatever it is. And Little Kirk Douglas Way, we saw pictures from Harry of where we are today. Is that part of the analysis been done about how we're gonna flow those cars? And
that is, we're looking at more lanes, and we're also as part of the CEQA process, we have to do a traffic impact analysis on each of the roads, each of the intersections. But yes, that's an important component of this, is putting more traffic on the roads. It's going to be impactful.
Back up on the long road.
so how can we make a recommendation to this council or wherever, if that traffic impact study hasn't been done? I thought I heard you say that would be done after it goes to council.
Correct. We need a decision on a preferred terminal concept, so we know what we're analyzing. It's more like, yeah, it's a expensive process to have the traffic engineers model the traffic impacts on all these, but we take those forecasts, they take the preferred terminal, and then there may be refinements to the concept based on the results of that traffic impact analysis.
Question?
Yes, actually an echo of what was just asked. One concern I have is the amount of, curbside space that there will be, because obviously, one of the photos earlier was just the number of cars lined up with our small terminal right now, the people dropping people off and picking people up. So one question was the amount of space and the traffic that would flow in and out. The second question I had was the check-in photo that you had. Given our anticipated growth, do we think there will be enough counter space? I know that there's been some analysis in some of the master plan paperwork I saw earlier to make sure that between the growth of passengers and perhaps an increased number of airlines, that there'll be enough space to, in an organized fashion, check in people for flights based on the way you've got check-in facility.
Ryan, I could take that one. And before that question, I do want to throw in another point for the traffic that's going to be taken part in front of the terminal. So this concept also includes a ground transportation area that is right by the fountain. So what that does is get the ground transportation vehicles off of the main curb. So in an ideal world, you want every vehicle that is not using the curb front to not even go near the head house of the terminal. So that's what this alternative provides as well. It's getting those shuttles and TNC, so your transportation network companies, Ubers, your Lyft, and getting them off of the main curb and into their own designated area. So that does free up curb space as well. And in phase 2 of this alternative, we are expanding the curb front as well. So, and then this will lead into the ticketing conversation. So that purple, yeah, so that's the ticketing, the ticketing area expansion. For ticketing specifically, currently there are 51 counters, full service positions. With I think we have 3 vacancies of those 51. We are forecasting up to about 65 full service positions, and then also an additional 15 to 20 bag drop stations. So what airlines are doing and what they're evolving into doing in the ticketing area is they're starting to get away from the full service position and converting those into bag drop stations. So Alaska Airlines, for example, they just implemented this new self bag checking mechanism in Palm Springs ticketing area. Actually, it's there today. It's the first airport that they deployed it at, where you check in. If you're checking a bag, you check in on your phone. You place a barcode underneath this kiosk by the Alaska Airlines area on the ticketing counter, and they print out the self bag ticket. You tag your bag, and then you drop it off the bag station. So they're trying to have people spend as little time in the ticketing area as possible. And we're going to probably see that type of trend evolve more as the years go on here. But yeah, we are providing more ticket counter space and more area for that bag drop stations.
Other questions on 1 before we go to 3?
We good?
Baggage claim, and is baggage claim?
Yes, so Harry mentioned baggage claim earlier. There's a big $30 million baggage claim, $32 million baggage claim project being implemented in the short term. Alternative 1A probably takes advantage of that project in terms of repurposing it, whereas going to alternative 3, you're going to lose that investment pretty quick. So baggage claim it's a good thought. It would take some architectural design to figure out how this is going to work and how the tugs pass under the concourse. But it certainly can be done.
So in terms of, this may be a question about to ask after we look at both alternatives, but can you speak either now or afterward to long-term operational costs? And are there any, even if we're looking at this first pass at this point, I mean, are there any things we should be paying specific attention to in the two alternatives with that particular, through that particular lens?
Yeah, Justin, feel free to jump in if you have thoughts on this one. It is important, obviously, by replacing facilities, you're gonna build everything more energy efficient. We do have a plan, it's shown on here, this number 2 is, the idea is that there would be a central utility plant for either of these alternatives constructed across the street from El Cielo. Because the expansion of these terminals is so significant that it's gonna overwhelm the city utilities. So the plan is for a separate utility plant that serves either of these alternatives, and the site identified for that is across the street. But to your life cycle cost question, yeah, new facilities are gonna be more energy efficient. But the dollar amounts that we're talking about to construct these facilities, I think kind of come the maintenance and operations difference. But it is a good thought. Justin, any other thoughts?
No, you summarized it, Ryan. I mean, I would just, we had our engineer, our MEP engineers on site assessing the facility. And you know, a summary of that was any expansion of the existing is going to have to require some rebuild and relocation of utilities. That's why the central utility plant is a recommendation to move forward with this. I mean, that's just that's pretty common in any type of terminal facility that's reaching the age similar to Palm Springs here. The utilities are just reaching the end of its useful life, and with an added expansion of this size, replacing those utilities is going to be crucial.
So 1A is a 2.2, 3 is a 2.8. And so at our last meeting, the comment was made by staff that the staff felt that the new airport version 3 would be a lot more efficient operation. And now, Ryan, are you saying that that's not that it's wrong or different, but you're saying, is it not as significant as it was stated in the last meeting?
Yeah, it's a good question.
So I'll add some context to it. So Ryan's speaking specifically toward the utilities. I'm looking at not only the utilities, but also the efficiency of the airfield, our ability to get around, things like that. So when you say operational costs, there's the utilities cost, but there's the overall, like the other activities that happen on the airfield campus.
Do you have any guesstimate of the annual cost difference between these two?
In terms of operations and maintenance?
Yeah.
Well, I think you also gotta look, we were talking about looking past 20 years, right? I mean, if we're gonna get a new terminal, it's gonna be 50 years, so there's gonna be a lot of operational efficiencies over 50 years if we're in that terminal for 50 years versus having to build here. We're gonna continue to have issues for a really long time because of how old the building is. So I think it's important not to just do short-sighted in just the 20 years, but to look beyond that. What is that long-term cost gonna be for operational? So does that mean that this 1A model, you're thinking of a 20-year useful life once completed? And then we're back, I mean, our successors are back to the drawing board, essentially.
Well, it's a 20-year master plan. That is the window that FAA recommends airports plan for. But obviously, we're in the 1960 building, so these facilities last much longer than 20 years and they quite frankly have to last. You can't build new every 20 years. So the thought is this new concourse, just like Bono's what, 30 years old?
Bono's 20
years old, so, yeah, so Bono's 20 years old, but still operating relatively efficiently. It can use a little bit more holding space, but
so to that point, as the buildings age, And as regulations change, that then starts to become a problem, right? So Jeremy and I were having this discussion with one of the other consultants this morning, specific to baggage claim, about the challenges we're having there. The seismic code that was written years and years ago no longer applies, and so now we're trying to figure out, okay, how do you build this baggage claim efficiently, save money, and still address the seismic issues there, and there's not really a good answer to that. So that's just one example of the challenges we're running into specific to this building, not even the other two.
Then there's the historical challenges that we're having, trying to get things approved through the FAA, which is a whole nother game that we're learning the hard way right now.
So what does that mean?
Just a quick follow. So after 20 years, 3 or 1A, are we pretty much maxed out from a footprint perspective, or does one of them have more expansion opportunity than the other?
Interesting. Justin, any thoughts on? I think if I go back to the full build out, well, I guess we got a full build out on those here.
Both of them look like they're taking a lot of footprint of the triangle, so. What happens in year 50 is not really relevant.
Alternative three could probably be, you could probably relocate Kirk Douglas and continue to expand this concourse, and alternative three. But they're fairly close. They both essentially build out the entire platform. 34 gates is pretty much as much as you can fit into this triangle.
Let's start in some respects that the specific question that perhaps is illustrative. So, I mean, if in 15 years, EV totals have the capacity to get us a year or two forever, I mean, does a plan like this, with that the representative question, right? Does it allow for, I know it's an airtight thing, but does the configuration of these terminals allow for those currently not implemented additions that might be coming to a complex like ours?
So from my perspective, just as an ops guy who's been doing the ops side of this for about a decade, more than a decade. Alternative three gives us a lot more flexibility and efficiency with that. Because you're using new space, you're incorporating new thinking into that space. And when you do that, that allows a lot more opportunity for other activities or changes in how the business model of airlines or aviation happens. When you add on to space, sure, it'll work. If we were to add on to the existing facility, but then you're always looking to band-aid the situation as you go.
Look at option 3.
Okay, so option 3, the first phase is shown on this graphic. So what's unique about option 3 compared to 1A is to get to a fully functioning airport terminal, you really have to build most of it in phase 1. So phase 1 is significant in this alternative. We estimated 900 million for phase 1 of 1A. We estimate 1.7 billion, so not quite twice as much, but close to twice as much in alternative 3. And the reason is you're building this entirely new head house. You're adding all of these gates, and you're trying to keep all of the gates open on Bono while you're under construction, plus probably some of the gates in the regional jet concourse. And so you end up with you have 18 total gates today if you count the walkout gates. And at the end of phase 1 and this alternative, you would have 20 gates. So it's only a net increase in 2, but as Justin pointed out correctly, that you are transitioning some of those from walkout gates to jet bridge gates. Obviously the CONRAC is included, the central utility plant is included. This parcel lot F that's shown on this drawing is not airport property currently, that would be property to be acquired. And would be kind of desperately needed, it's hard to tell on this drawing, but Kirk Douglas is slid back from its current location to the south slightly to make room for the head house. Which makes the amount of parking space available very, very constrained. Justin, anything to add on phase one of alternative 3?
Yeah, the commission might be wondering, you know, why are we only providing 20 narrow body positions when our demand is a lot more than that in this initial phase? And the reason being is we have to consider the operation of the existing airport while building this and while constructing it. So we have to have access for those aircraft that the Ryan's mouse is over right now. We have to have access to the regional jet concourse while construction is going on. So essentially the west part of the new concourse can't be open until the regional concourse is demolished in this phase. So the gate count does get restricted in this phase 1. So, you know, with that $1.7 billion price tag for this initial phase, we are gaining 2 boarding bridge gates, 2 contact gates. So that equates to about $55 million per gate, compared to phase 1 and alternative, compared to phase 1 and alternative 1A, which is about 22.6 million per gate for the 7 gates that we're gaining in phase 1A.
And it's one of our concerns because the airlines are going to take it and divide the cost by the number of net increasing gates and not be happy with that calculation.
Has any thought been given to capping phase 1 as final and leaving the Bono and regional, much like San Diego has terminal 1, terminal 2, terminal 2A? You just need to know where you're going, you know, as a passenger. How many gates would that add just by adding and leaving it at that phase? Or has that thought been even looked at?
So are you saying, just build the head house with just the number of gates needed to maximize capacity there?
Yep.
And maintain regional and maintain Bono, in like just you name 2 terminals.
And then have security in both terminals.
And many other airports do that repeatedly all over.
Yeah, you spoke my mind to a large extent, but not completely. So thank you for raising that. Like, I've been sitting here, I came into this room saying, we've got to preserve, the Wexler building. That's the only option I want to hear about. But that's not where I've come down after a lot of this discussion, especially when you just said we will only go from 20 to 22 gates. I do think it's critical for the city, for the historical nature of our, or how history drives our economy here, that this building remain alive. I saw in one of the presentations that it said, well, the community will decide the future of this building. That's basically saying it's gonna be a white elephant. It'll sit empty for 30 years and decay. We can't do that. We have an iconic city hall across the street. We have this iconic Wexler building here. Can we just make this 20 or 30% of the gates and preserve this building? It would still be in use. This can be the international terminal, maybe 1 or 2 other airlines. And then you get, the staff gets what you want, which is the state of the art. You know, this would be renovated and would look pretty and all that and be up to date technologically. And then you get what you guys want and what I think the community wants also, which is, maybe it becomes 14 completely new gates or whatever the number is. And then we get closer to the 31 that was going to be jammed into the space. And then maybe you can move the Conrad more to where it is in this drawing. So it's not sort of this huge clunky thing that stands between the Wexler building and City Hall and the Tuckwitz entrance. So I think there's like, and I know you guys are way down the road on this, but it feels like there's a certain logic to having two terminals, and also what will be the traffic benefit of peeling off, 20 or 30% of the traffic that will come here, and then have, the 70% that goes, whatever it is, to the brand new terminal. Perhaps two even different flows of the road, or, you guys can figure that out.
I think some of the concern, I'll start with your comments are relevant. And certainly it's something that we haven't done into deeply, but I think some of the concern was the redundancy and operations, having two locations for TSA at a time where they're trying to scale back their staffing. Same with customs, same with operations. My team would have to go road and accommodate this two function. So it's not something that I heard of. It certainly is not in our airports, but the efficiency is what we're looking at through this.
Ryan, you mentioned that we would be 3.5 years on 1A.
Yes.
Phase 1 of 1A. How long, this is significant, it's twice as much money.
Yes.
How long would this take?
It's twice as much money, it's twice as much construction, physical.
So we're 6 years.
So closer to 6 years, yes.
6 years to get no increase in gates.
Just
In phase 1.
In phase 1.
But good point.
So can we afford to be at 18 gates for 6 more years? Oh, more, I guess 9 more years before you can have more gates in phase 3 and 2.
All right. How operational is the regional terminal with phase 1? Is it?
With phase 1 of this, what we're looking at right here?
Yeah, is there gonna be operations in regional?
Yes, Justin, you looked at that and you parked 3 aircraft at the regional? You recall?
So right during construction of this, so imagine that none of the aircraft parked on the new terminal are there, and we're just building that. We will be able to, so the end gates will have to be demolished because we're going to need to provide taxiway access around the construction staging area. So I believe it's 4 to 5 gates that will remain operational during construction. And then once the shift occurs over to the new terminal, the regional and the Bono concourse are shut down. All the airline operations are moved over to the new one.
In 6.5 years.
That 4 gates wouldn't be used. Right now, we have planes just sitting there waiting for gates. And for 6 years, we're gonna have them just sitting there.
Well, not for all 6 years, but your point is yes. Nobody said this would be easy. Thank you.
If I could, I'll just flip through the slide. Phases of alternative 3. So phase 1, looks like this. Phase 2 is when both the regional concourse and Bono would go away, and you would turn this into a taxi. Basically, where they currently exist would become a taxi lane. You can see that this taxi lane could, as Justin mentioned, could serve wide body or narrow body aircraft, and your FIS would be located in somewhere in the western half of this head house, and the gate and the international arrivals would park at these gates.
Right. International would be phase 2 of this?
No, international would be phase 1.
Would be in phase 1.
Correct, as would the FIS. So phase 1 of both alternatives gets you your high priorities, which are more gates, CONRAC, and FIS. We wanted to make sure that that was included in phase 1 of both options. It just takes a lot more building to get to it.
Somebody on Zoom have a question? Okay, go ahead.
So that's phase 1. Phase 2 then is a couple more. Basically, the difference between phase 1 and phase 2 is this side of the center concourse we can now use for aircraft gates. So we've now got it's a pretty significant increase. We go up to 24 narrow body gates in phase 2, and then in phase 3 we're up to 28 narrow body gates. in phase 4 just extends the western concourse, so we get to our 30, our total of 32, and there could be 34 gates again. Potentially, if you move Kirk Douglas, you could extend this parking apron and have an equal number of gates between the two. What that looks like from a visualization standpoint, again, this is the full build out, so this is why you see the Wexler terminal in this rendering, but you do not see the Bono concourse or the regional jet concourse. They've been demolished. This does give you some perspective about the location of the CONRAC. And that's looking at this alternative from the northeast, and this is a view looking at the alternative from the southeast.
Is there any version of 3 that could meaningfully incorporate Wexler into efficient and that?
As part of a terminal function, yeah. Justin, any thoughts on how we could repurpose Wexler for, I mean, in 3, really the only use that I see is repurposing it as concourse, which maybe it's just walkout gates, Justin?
Yeah, it could be, it could be a passenger amenity such as a museum. I believe I had a little trouble hearing, but I think one of the comments was, can that be your FIS and international? And Harry, you may have, I think I heard you touch on it too, about the separate operations of 2 terminal head houses. So that also includes additional baggage infrastructure too, which is something that shouldn't be taken too lightly. If you do have commercial operations in 2 separate facilities, and then you have the TSA operations as well as the CBP, which is your Customs Border Patrol. But yeah, with a museum, you can have over there other type of viewing areas for passengers. Yeah, we don't have a defined area on that yet.
So I don't think the answer is no. Yeah.
There's gonna be Canada, which is international, and other international, and it's clean. Nobody gets confused. If you're going international, you come here, and it takes a whole bunch of gates. And then, and I just have to say, I mean, as a traveler, 95% of the airports I go to have 2 terminals or more, and the airport staff manages them. They run. How many 2 or more terminal airports do you know that have been complete failures?
I don't know any that have been failures. I do know it's very uncommon at this size of airport.
Because of the redundancy between TSA and baggage.
Is that true for medium size too?
For medium hubs and large hubs, it's, I don't know. Justin, do you know any medium hubs that have 2 terminals?
I will say, so I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and we have 3 separate checkpoints at 3 of our concourses. And we're actually in the middle right now of doing a $2 billion program to have 1 consolidated checkpoint, because we learned during the pandemic that it just is not operationally feasible to have 3 separate checkpoints for TSA. They are looking to consolidate as many of their operations as possible due to staffing and other operational benefits. But Ryan's right. I know San Diego was mentioned. That's a large hub airport. They have 11 million annual enplanements a year. So they can probably justify a facility like that. When we're talking about 6 million annual passengers, I think the fight might be a little bit harder with TSA to justify that type of operation.
Justin, Kansas City's a medium hub that also went from 3 terminals down to 1. So going the opposite direction with the consolidation of TSA being the primary driver.
I think Spokane is probably similar in traffic to Palm Springs, and they had 2 terminals, and they're building a facility in the middle of the 2, so TSA goes in the middle. And
Commissioner Pond, you had a question?
How much thinking, if any at all, has been done with the idea that if you use alternative three, that Wexler, I mean, I know you say, well, the community can decide what to do with Wexler, but has any thought been given to say, putting, let's say, USO there, or turning over part of the facility to the Palm Springs Air Museum, so that it can be used as, or maybe one of the FBOs, I don't know, but I know that we're still at the talking stage, but has any thought been given to using the facility, the Wexler building, or something like that?
Yeah, so, yes, we have talked about it. There's a list of probably 10 to 12 different ideas that incorporate all of those and more. So for example, one of them was an on-airport hotel, converted to something like that. We really wanted, the reason we were saying we wanted the community involved in that process is because it really is an iconic building and people do care about it. We really don't want people making the decision about it.
Some art groups have already heard about this and said, let's make it part of the museum. I mean, I think people are looking at option three and saying, oh, I can figure out what to do with that extra building. And so, you know, yes, people have stepped forward and said, we got ideas, but it's kind of this museum, another wing of the museum type of thing, but it wouldn't be connected to the airport, like physically connected to number three.
Understood, and then the reason why I'm asking is because I know that there's an awful lot of fondness for Wexler. Myself, my main concern is creating an efficient facility that can serve Palm Springs needs. And to the extent that Wexler tends to, almost they stand in the way of that, which presents a significant challenge to incorporate all those ideas in. Although it's more expensive and takes longer, alternative three is one that I've looked at more as I've looked at the materials that have been sent to us. The one thing that I like about 1A is that it gives us a fairly quick access to international and some degree of expansion early on, because 1A can happen a lot faster. But if we're thinking about moving from 3 million employments to 6, I don't see how we can continue with the idea of keeping Wexler in the mix unless it's repurposed for something like the USO and the museum, but it may not be part of the flight line.
Well, you're saying 1A will wind up with 34 things, so we'll have enough gates in 1A.
True.
To do it.
It's just faster and perhaps less efficient.
Neil, just ask hold for 1 second, because I really want to get into this stuff, and we only have some time left. Do you have other slides you need to share, or can we jump into this?
The only other, so we have a summary slide that again kind of quantifies the cost as well as how many gates you get, how many RON positions, how many surface parking spaces. A lot of this can be figured out in design, but and then I wanted to share the schedule and cost slide. So we talked
Sorry,
about this.
I'm so sorry. Could you go back to that previous slide?
Sure.
And can you just very quickly tell us the different timelines and the phases? So 1A, phase 1, 3.5 years?
Yes, 3.5 years and probably 6 years on 3. So that's the delta between the two timelines.
And phase 2, can you compare the alternatives through the phases, please?
Yes, phase 2, then phases 2, 3, and 4 in both alternatives, essentially just to start to add more gates. You do build more head house in phase 2 of alternative 1. But essentially the head house that you start with in alternative 3 is the head house that you have in all the alternatives. So just
and I guess my question is phase 2, what's the timeline for those phases?
So yeah, 3.5 years and 6 years of the timeline for phase 1. Phase 2 is probably another 5.
Yeah, you probably have, for phase 2 in both, you probably have another year of design, year and a half to 2 years of design, and then another 2 years of, 1 to 2 years of construction. And at
And
phase
that's the same for both, correct?
Yeah, because that's like Ryan says, it's just essentially just adding concourse and apron after that.
Right.
And Justin, Ryan, this presumes traditional funding method, right? We go through the approval from the airlines, AIP, TFCs, funding, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that's the schedule and cost slide, and yeah, that's really all that I have. We do have recommendations in our report for the architects when they go to design this to incorporate things like accessibility, inclusivity, energy efficiency, reducing the amount of water that's used. All of the airport sustainability goals are going to be important to the architects when they get to design, but I have some slides that talk about the next step, or one slide that talks about the next steps after we have a decision on this, but
Let's open it up for discussion. So let me see if I can help. So 1A preserves the Wexford building. It gets us 8 new gates plus international capability within 3.5 years. You know, and again, this is all subject to. Downside could be we have to look at a great big Conrack, maybe, although I suggest all of you walk outside and kind of look to the north. It's certainly a lot further away than I originally thought when we first saw it, when the working group saw it. We said to you, if you could bury it, you know, take $500 million and bury it, then it wouldn't have that big elephant thing perhaps. And we're at $2.2 million. We're gonna eventually get to all the gates we need and that. But the risk is that we're gonna be putting a Band-Aid certainly on this facility and maybe on the Bono. And that will create some challenges in terms of the efficiency of the airport if we keep this. In terms of, to David's point, those who love the architecture, we preserve the architecture. It's part of the active airport. So we get international flights faster. And but we have the risk that these existing buildings are going to create some operational challenges moving forward. And it's gonna be a lot less money. And we're probably gonna get to the 34 faster than we would, right?
Correct.
So we're gonna get to all the fully operational gates faster than we would. It seems like 3A is gonna give us a brand new airport, but it's gonna take a lot longer to get there. And you know, for those of us who are really interested, and I know Scott and Todd at the Chamber of Commerce, they're an out-top or hot, like, let's get this international stuff going. Knowing that we're gonna have 6.5 years to get to that. I mean, that's a consideration.
You could build a temporary campus. You know, that's always something that
Just
could
to
be
get
done,
that.
and that's a stickler.
But the other one is we wait 6.5 years, and again, I'm not voting here yet. 6.5 years to get a brand new terminal, or at least to get the first phase of the brand new terminal. And the Wexford thing, you know, I don't think there's a reason, what I'm hearing today, it's just not a really reasonable way to pull that into the deal. We don't think we can afford 2 terminals. It's hard to pull that into options free in a meaningful way. So now we're looking at another purpose for it, right? And how do we feel about that and the approach to the airport and all other stuff? The traffic thing, I think, is an issue on both of them. We still don't have a clear understanding, and so you won't be able to tell us until we pick one. And the Conrack in 3A or number 3 is sent over to LCL, so I guess that isn't as big an impact as it is for 1A. Some of us that are concerned about the big white elephant. So that's what I heard today. Jump on. Other thoughts, comments, reactions?
Is there
You
a
know-
way?
Sorry. You know, Kevin, quickly, my only other thought, as I'm looking down, sorry, at my graph here, 25 gates in 1A in phase 1 versus 20 gates in alternative 3. That delta of 5 gates, I just need somebody to help me get over that concern of how we lose those 5 gates, what that means in that interim period on the cost per use of the existing gates to the airlines, And so I'm curious from Harry and the staff's team, the staff side, what their feeling is on the loss of those 5 gates.
Well, no one wants to speak, I'll let him speak and then I'll.
So I think it's important for everybody to understand that we currently operate with 18 gates, and 10 of those gates are not loading bridge gates. So when we're talking increase of 2 gates to 22, we're talking 22 loading bridges. So it's a significant cost to operate for every turn, and it's a better passenger experience going through loading bridge and a larger aircraft more frequently. At times, the airlines bring in some smaller aircraft because they're parking at the regional concourse without a loading bridge, and that's a factor.
But they can get loading bridges to those regional jets too.
Correct.
But at this point, isn't it the airline's choice whether to use a regional jet or a 37 anyway?
It is their choice. Typically what they do each year is they reach out to us and they say, okay, how many drawn spots do you have? How many gates do you think you're gonna have available? What is the ability to park overnight or accommodate this type of aircraft? And we'll tell them what we can accommodate, and they do send what they send. But to Ramon's point, if they think that there's gonna be an issue bringing in a larger aircraft, for whatever reason, they're gonna opt for the smaller one until we're able to accommodate the large.
So this whole argument, does it favor 1A or favor 3? I'm not sure.
I think he's just giving you the facts. So in alternative 3, what we would most likely be looking at is some kind of hard stand operation for a while. Basically to make up those gates. We're in.
What's that, Harry, what's that definition of for a while?
That would come down to the phasing plan. I couldn't give you any type of accurate answer.
Right.
I mean, if that's years of busing and that kind of I'm just trying to understand how long we have to live with that less than desirable option from a customer experience.
So, Todd, if I may jump in real quick. So, a good way to measure gate usage is the amount of enplanements you have per gate. In 2022, Palm Springs, we had about 1.5 million annual enplanements over 18 gates. So we have 21 positions, but only 18 gates that can be processed simultaneously. So that equated to about 84,000 enplanements per gate in 2022. So when we're talking about losing 5 gates, that's potentially about 420 or about 415,000 enplanements between that delta. Now there are some variables on, if you can RON overnight, drop the passengers off at your late night arrival, and then move your aircraft and the type of operation, but that could equate to about 415 annual enplanements with those 5 gates. Another thing too, just a couple facts about between the 2 alternatives is alternative 1A, you do have the option to halt the program based off of some type of economic circumstance. With alternative 3, and this is with any type of new build for terminals across in the industry, once you do a terminal on a greenfield site, you kind of have to go all in for that initial phase for that $1.7 billion up front. So, that sometimes that could be a reality check on whether or not you can go all in up front like that. Also, that alternative 1, it does recognize that major investment that the airport is currently putting in to baggage claim and to the baggage screen projects that are going on too. But I just wanted to throw those in there as well as we were summarizing.
Commissioner White, you have a question?
Well, that's similar to what I was gonna say. It's like, I understood it initially, the phases we could reevaluate. Do we really need 32 gates in 20 years? Maybe we only need 20 gates. The technology changes, and so if we do with 3, we're all in. And we don't do phase 2 for 6 years. If the 1A, phase 1 is done in what, 3 or 4 years. Then we can say we don't need any more phase 2, 3 in either one of these.
So how many gates if we had 8 plus 20 or 8 plus 18? So we'd be at 26 gates. This is 1A in 3.5 years.
25 is what Justin's showing.
Okay.
Something that I've seen, with alternate three, doesn't matter which phase, is we have a significant parking lot A that is servicing nothing. It's just so remote compared to where operations actually are, versus, one.
It also assumes that the property across the street from check-in, this is option 3, we don't own that property yet. I think it's what, F, is that the one?
Yes.
Lot F?
Yeah, lot F.
But in terms of customer experience, we really want to have that. Now, we have 6.5 years to eminent domain or some other ways to get that land. But you really need to have that parking available when option 3 opens up.
Commissioner Feldman?
Yeah, so I'm gonna challenge Kevin a little bit that there's no way to connect the terminal 3 or the option 3 with 1A. I'm looking at 3 or 4-13 alternative 3 fulfilled, and probably the way it's laid out here, it's not practical to connect them, but perhaps in another design where the check-in is exclusively in terminal 3, or what I call terminal 3, in 3, and then you use a people mover. I've also been on people movers all over the country and the world, and it's not really that far a distance. There's a submerged people mover train that goes like essentially 2 minutes. Then people will get into the old Wexler terminal and be able to still have this be operational. So it keeps this building alive. So I'm wondering if you can look at that.
So that scenario, David, what do you think?
I've heard about people movers, by the way, from Ken Hendrick, in terms of possibility of having connecting the Conrack to something, I guess the terminal. So this is, I'm just putting that on the table for everybody here to say, I'm not just like making up the idea that of a people mover, and it's never been discussed. I haven't been in those meetings, but I know it was raised in a different context. So I just want, it has some relevance because they do work pretty efficiently.
Ken had proposed, as part of the working group, that we consider a subterranean people mover, that would avoid the heat. And it would connect the Conrack if we put it to the south side of the business, the south side. Because everybody likes the idea, you get your bag and walk outside, get your own car. And so Ken said, well, there's another way of looking at this, and if we built underground some sort of a connector from baggage claim to Conrack, would that be a possibility?
This is a different context. This would be connecting the new terminal to the old terminal. Quicker. And then you could have your single point of entry. That's the reason I'm raising it, is that's.
So keep playing with that, David. So in that scenario, if you were to make that connection, what would we use the Wexler for?
International. Canada, and those international flights we're dreaming of getting and hoping will come to fruition.
So keep playing with this. If we did, if option 3, if phase 4 was really just making the Wexler, phase 3 or phase 4, the Wexler, the international terminal, could that happen? Interesting idea.
Yeah, we were just talking about how you might park aircraft at that Wexler terminal and alternative 3 if that were. The problem is international, you've got to screen those passengers. So you've got to have your separate screening checkpoints in that scenario.
So the redundancy of the TSA, the aircraft is here, you gotta be able to put people
And
in and out.
redundancy of your baggage claim and baggage handling systems.
Other comments, other questions, thoughts?
So, that I'm struggling on the 25 days versus 20 days after 6 years. Under option 3, what is the gate capacity that you laid out? How does that relate to passenger demand? Are we gonna be in worse shape for years 1 through 6 until 6? Because if we picked option 3, or are we gonna be? Okay, I that's where I'm struggling, because that's a big difference between 20 and 25.
So that's likely going to be an airline business decision, whether they choose to fly here while we're in construction. I can tell you right now, all of the airlines I can't see them pulling back much, back. Of course, I'm not in their boardrooms making their decisions.
But literally, if you got no new gates for the next 6 years, because we're building option 3, what
So-
shape are you gonna be in year 4, 5, and 6?
So, and to Commissioner Burke's point, which is valid, it really comes down to a customer experience issue. And so we would, and we're already planning for this, we would have to implement a busing operation to get people from our stand to a company. Make sure that we're focusing on those security areas to make that happen. The customer experience certainly would take a dip for a couple of years.
I hate to add another consideration, but, we're doing a noise study over at Burbank, and so I'm a little familiar with what they're doing. Burbank, if you're not familiar, is trying to build a new terminal on the other side of the runway. 12 gates currently, and they're replacing it with 12 gates. They don't want any growth, so that's why they're not adding net gates. But they're, in the last few years, in the design of that terminal, they've been scaling back the design because of cost. The first design that the architect came up with was too elaborate and they can't afford it, and they keep scaling back and scaling back. My concern is that Palm Springs, you decide to go down this route of a brand new terminal, and then it becomes obvious in design that we can't afford this, and we gotta take this way, and we gotta take this way, and you start to lose the things that everyone tells you is so unique about this airport.
The thing, in option 3, we have this experience, you walk off a plane in the Bono and you have your outdoors and the view and everybody goes, wow. I know that there was outdoor space in option 3, but all of the terminals, that we call them, they're all enclosed.
Yeah, the idea is to have both courtyard and an opportunity to not pass through the courtyard if you don't want to, and alternatively.
Okay, other comments, reactions?
Has there been consideration, in terms of projected climate change impact on outdoor areas in the airport in 20 years? I mean, the desirability of that's figured into design thinking and all.
It's a good thought. I think that's why you're moving forward with shade structures.
We talked about it internally. I don't think we really landed on anything necessarily that, so part of the draw for this airport obviously is the whole experience. Like that, but we did, do something completely different. We haven't really.
People trying to grapple with the notion of a 20-year bill, be something that may have a 20-year life, and then again, our successors being in this room, and or whichever room, 15 to 20 years or 10 years, trying to decide. I mean, so if we were to go with the 1A option, I mean, based on the best projections of our operational people, Harry, our team, our consultants, I mean, are we going to be in a place in 10 or 15 years where we're looking at having to do, well, what's the chance? Nobody knows, and there's no crystal ball, but are we going to be in a place in 10 or 15 years where we're having to say, we got to really go back to the drawing board because we were building around current facilities as opposed to starting new. And I trust it's probably an impossible question to answer, but it is one that for me feels like it's just sort of deeply tied into the decision we're trying to make.
I was just telling Jeremy that this morning, I don't want to be the airport director where the next guy's like, why did he make this decision? Because that happens to me a lot, where I'm sitting there like, where did this even come from? So to your point,
We know all about that.
So to your point, that's what I'm looking at is if we make a decision today, that it's going to be a lasting decision. That 25, 30, 40 years from now, somebody's sitting at that desk is going to look and say, I get it. I understand why they did this.
Would you say that one A, in terms of growth, in terms of international, would you keep one A, keep Wexler as part of the airport operation? Would you say that looking 20 years down the road, looking at the operation of the airport 20, 25 years down the road, that you would feel that alternative 3 or 1A, would you feel more hamstrung by 1A or by 3? As an operation,
I wouldn't view it in those terms. I think I would view it more in terms of if we were to go with 1A, there would probably be a lot of heavy lifting long term, but you get a really short term gain, right? It's easier to manage, get a lot of stuff built at once. You can make it work, Band-Aid fixes. And option 3, there's a lot of short term pain for sure. Like there's no doubt in that. However, you get a long term benefit.
some of you know that one of my biggest interests was really turning this airport into an international operation. I'm wondering if you said, you know what, in a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, we can do 1A and have an FIS, have a couple of stands where there could be international aircraft, maybe even land in 87 years. My question is this. Some of the people I've talked to over the past few months have said, you know what, there's really not that much interest yet in bringing BA, Aer Lingus, Volaris, any of these other airlines in here yet. If we had 1A right now, how many internationals do you think would be willing to come within 6 months? Where there's been interest, you know, if you had that, we would be there within a year.
So I can't speak for the airlines, they, stuff changes all the time. I would say that there's a very strong likelihood that at least 2 of our current carriers would be ready to go.
Scott White would tell you. Todd, do you want to answer that question?
Well, I'm not gonna speak for Scott, but I would say that there, and it echoes what Harry's saying, there is very strong interest. We just finished, as many of you know, a really interesting tour of the UK and Ireland. We know there's tremendous interest from that part of the world for nonstop service here. So there very much is interest from other parts of the world to come here nonstop. It opens up options for us for Mexico as well, which we previously haven't been able to consider. So I would say that there's significant interest. I can't tell you how quickly they can make that decision. I'm not sitting, as Harry said, we're not sitting on the airline side of their operations and where they choose to put their, multi-million-dollar pieces of metal, but there's significant interest.
And our early working team meetings, I think Scott had mentioned, London, Dublin, Copenhagen, and all of Mexico. That they would be able to activate now in 3.5 years to build it. They would be able to find airlines interested from those locations. They've been our conversations they've had so far.
Yeah.
And the whole international thing opens up in terms of tourism here and hotels and all sorts of great opportunities. And that's the big surprise. I mean, 3.5 years versus 6.5 years to be able to leverage that interest and take advantage of kind of momentum that we've created here in the city, not only the airport, but the whole city. Unless you did something as a one-off, build a temporary FIS or something like that.
Well, I guess the other thing too, though, is that at some point or other, let's just say there were 2 flights a week from Aer Lingus and once or twice a week with BA. You've got presumably 87s. I don't think you can get anything bigger in here. But the real question is, they're going to come into 1A with a stand that's got 2 to 4 international spaces at the Wexler terminal. And what I'm wondering is that if the interest is that strong, and there are airlines from Mexico and Scandinavia and the rest of Europe that might want to do flights here, especially during the high season. If there's that kind of interest, does the international extension under 1A in the Wexler terminal get a bit wonky? In other words, it's one thing if you have two flights a week, 3 flights a week, 4 flights a week. But at some point or other, doesn't that extension and use of Wexler, it's an old building, let's face it, become too wonky to be workable if we really attract the international attention that we think we might get? I mean, if we're really right about this, doesn't that mean that we need a more modern facility that can grow with that interest, as opposed to jerry-rigging a lovely old building that was not built for this purpose?
We have the same amount of international gates in both plants, right?
Correct.
And if you're gonna build new gates, they're gonna be modern gates, they're just gonna connect to the Wexler eventually, but.
And I think in either alternative, if that international traffic grew faster than you thought, you could convert, you could have more than 2 international gates. Jonathan, do you agree?
Yes. Very much. Yeah, maybe. But I was gonna say to his point.
Three.
So when I alluded to the baggage claim earlier, one of the discussions we were having was, okay, well, if you go this route, it's full on shut down the baggage claim, you're gonna have to figure out how to do an alternative method, and you have to rebuild the thing and then add to it, and oh, by the way, at the end of that, we don't know if we can expand it. So those are the challenges we're dealing with.
I think that's one of my concerns, is we keep hearing about gate expansion, which is great. But I look at these pictures of the Wexler building itself, which I love, by the way, and I'm just concerned that getting from the street or the curb to the gate is still gonna be an issue, no matter what. I just don't know how, like you said, you could redesign it or whatever. I come from Seattle and I see SeaTac every day and I see that structure, and I go, those people are dealing with a building that is so outdated, and it is a disaster trying to get through that. And there's nothing they can do to change that facility. And I think airlines, for some reason, are going to Boeing and they're going up to Everett, just to try to alleviate some of that pain. I'm also see that with these 90 feet, but the fact that that structure is fixed, and this building is fixed, no matter how many gates I have.
So distance between Wexler and the international wing and the final wing going east. Were those distances significantly different than what would be in option 3?
Distance from like
The head house.
ticketing to
Yeah.
your gate. It's pretty similar. The 2 alternatives.
Yeah, your maximum walking distance is about 1,700 feet in 1A, and then about 1,600 feet in option 3. So it is a little less in option 3, but overall relatively similar.
Yeah.
So in option 1, we're still, in phase 1, we're still dealing with all the pain with the crunch, but once we get through phase 2 of option 1, then ticketing is opened up, and you have plenty of room, pretty much equivalent to what you get in phase 1 of option 3. Phase 1 is 3 years, phase 2 is like 5, it sounded like, versus phase 1 of 3 is, option 3 is 6 years.
Yes.
Can I ask a question about that phasing, because I think this is what you're alluding to in the previous conversation, so did that factor in the historic development of the environment?
You're not doing much with Wexler in phase 1, and you're significantly adding on to it in phase 2, so the idea is it gives you more time to work through that process.
If anything that touches the White Bear Valley.
We are having some serious challenges with environmental, obviously.
Yeah.
So are they such that if phase one or if option one A, I mean, is it conceivable that you'd be moving down option one A, having, I mean, city council having opted for that, and there be, I mean, very significant impediments to being able to move forward with it based on historical issues? I mean, with that,
We're having to jump through a lot of extra hoops right now, specific to the baggage claim on that. And in fact, we're under threat of losing our grant because of that.
Good. That's like add 2 years onto the 3.5-year bill, would it?
I don't know, what we expected to be a couple of months has turned into what, 8 months? Yeah.
Ridiculous. How much you really want that, David? All right. Has everyone had a chance, do you want to, those who haven't spoken, do you want to give your 2 cents? Is there any things you want to add? Anything else you want to add?
I think, one A makes no sense overall, 3.5 years, just seems on the price, the airlines are not gonna like that high price tag either, so it just seems more practical.
Anybody else who hasn't spoken, jump in.
I would just say, I like 3 better. I think it's better to have a clean slate. It takes us into the long-term future without any baggage. And it will help improve efficiencies and help staff do what they need to do. Honestly, the time frame doesn't bother me that much. I mean, realistically, Palm Springs is Palm Springs. People want to be here. What are they gonna do? Go to Banning? No. They're gonna and when it's done, this big beautiful airport, they're gonna come and they're gonna continue to come. That's what I think.
Other comments? Jan, anything else going to jump in?
No, I agree with her, but I want to go back to what you were talking about, which is a weakness. With the idea about HR, the process for procurement. In this whole mix, it needs to be advertised to the council who makes policy that this is important. Because you're still going to have a slow road with that. And so some kind of way nicely, the council needs to understand that this is an intricate part. I don't know about their budget or anything like that, but this is an intricate part. And if it's 3 years or 6 years, this needs to happen now. So that is the effort that council has. So anything else that comes, it's already established. Because like I just said, whether it's 3 or 6, you're gonna have problems if you've got that weakness.
We were talking, Jan and I were talking earlier about, can we add a chapter about the overall efficiency, which would address the issues that Harry discussed and challenged, that we think above and beyond this decision, we need to look at the relationship between HR, IT, and the others, and how the airport operates moving forward. And if that is a policy issue that goes to council saying, yes, we can have separate operations in HR, IT, other things here, should we make that part of our long-term ask as well? Jan, got it?
Question, based on what you just said, and what we said about the challenges with the concessions during construction, are we confident that the timeline is accurate given construction supply here in the valley? Is some airport construction company gonna come in here and do it on the timeline that we're looking for?
Well, so 2 things to that. I would say that I trust that Meeting has done their due diligence and has looked into this, and that timeline is gonna be pretty close to what they projected, no matter which alternative this body goes with. That said, internally, we're also looking at, non-traditional ways of paying for this and getting around that as well, so.
Yeah. What he's implying is the public. What he really is saying, the public-private partnerships, which is another thing that the working committee has been educated about, could move quickly, more quickly. And that the opportunity, both in terms of financing, how they pay for this thing, and also how fast you can move. There's some advantages of public and private partnerships, which we are exploring in this. And I think once we get a little bit further down the line, more information on that will come to the commission, but there are ways of moving quickly and more effectively from a finance point of view.
And might instead of shorten the time to ribbon cutting on either option, and if so, does that, because that seems like a relevant variable potentially, so an unknown. You know, if it shortens the variable between the two options to ribbon cutting, maybe does that impact how we might think about it? So it's, you know, if it's not 2.5 or 3 years and it's 18 months difference, then would that impact how any of us might be thinking about which options is most desirable?
Well, there's, from the two presentations I've been, there's layers and layers and layers and layers of detail. But conceptually, what they promise is move faster, finance it more creatively. But we never got to the point of like, you know, put the rubber to the road, and how much time are we talking about? So at this point, it's a general comment, a general set of benefits that have been presented to us, but there's layers and layers of things before you actually know what impact we have on this particular proposal. But just know that it's out there and it would have an influence. So, how do we move forward? Do you want to take a first pass? Christina set up a roll call vote. And maybe without, you know, putting a gun to all of our heads, do you want to take a first pass at it and just see where we are and how we're feeling about this as a commission and just see where we land? And then we can talk about it again and see what those numbers look like. And then we can decide if that is our recommendation or if we want to do something different. Would that work? Because I know we're gone over time, and thank you for spending more time. Can we do that? All right, let's take a roll call. So I guess the deal would be 1A or 3, pick one, and let's see where we land.
Commissioner Banks,
3.
Behrman,
1A.
Burke,
3.
Corcoran,
1A.
Feltman,
1A.
Fong,
3.
Martin,
1A.
Michaelis,
1A.
Park, 3. Kai,
3.
Wise,
1A.
Wiseman,
1A.
Young.
3.
Okay, we'll come back.
Kevin, may I ask one quick question? I noticed that Gensler gave renderings for alternate 1A of northeast, south, southwest, northeast, and Tockwitz, but they didn't give a Tockwitz view of option 3. That just might be interesting to have a look at, because as you look at these, at the slide that's on the screen right now, in option 3, the CONREC is significantly longer. It appears to be significantly longer than it is in 1A. So I would just, since I'm a really visual person, I'd be curious what that looks like from the Tockwitz side.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
We have 7 for 1A and 6 for 3.
Split down the middle. Well, Harry?
I actually wanted to take a time, because I wanted to say 1A and 3 hybrid, which is what I question you would have had actually. When I decided to play along with the framework you were providing.
So do we feel that we've had enough discussion on this, that the ability to lobby each other may not change it? I mean, the working group really struggled with this. And because there's pros and cons, as evidenced by our dialogue today. I'm not sure, unless you all disagree, that additional discussion here to try to lobby David to number 3 is going to, for example, would be a productive use of our time. But at the same time, I hate to punt to the city council to say, you know, we can't make up our mind here, when there's significant pros and cons. And so I wonder if this is not a negative thing to just tell them that, you know, we've explored the pros and cons of each of these, and there are trade-offs in each. And is that enough, or do we need to do more work and get more information from you, Ryan, that's going to move us one way or another?
To what David said, is there a possibility of a hybrid 1A3? Is that feasible? And that might be just something to look at.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be another effort by me and Hunt. And I would certainly want to run this by the council before we did any more additional effort on it.
But you guys have been pretty clear. That option is gonna involve having 2 sets of TSA, 2 sets of baggage and stuff like that.
From a tenant perspective, that's gonna be a tough outreach to that, to say, we're gonna split bag claim, we're gonna split TSA, we're gonna split baggage screening, and have redundant operations in a few different terminals, just. It doesn't seem to make sense for a small hub. This airport does operate like a medium hub in the busy season, not like a small hub. But then, you know, during the off season, I guess we would only operate one of those 2 terminals. We'd operate 2 during the busy season and 1 during the slow season.
I think it's tough, David.
Well, but my point about hybrid is, can you create a connector between Wexler and 3, not the way it's drawn now, because it wasn't drawn with the idea of making it hybrid, but if you were to move the ticketing side, so it's closer to Wexler instead of along where it is now, you know, kind of turning the building. Yeah, it's a redesign, it's a lot of money, all that stuff. But in the spirit of like blue sky, you know, the distance between this pier that ends from 3 to the edge of the Wexler building is minimal. So it's like, it's not, so if you can create single entrance and single point of security and baggage claim and all of that, what's in front of the new Conrad, could that work?
In your vision, what would the Wexler be used for?
National,
Alright, so
which includes Canada. Because Canada is, well, they don't have to go through immigration because they clear wherever they clear various places.
So you're saying, so there's an arrival at the Wexler International Terminal, you get off the plane and you either do customs there, and then you take a people mover to the big building where you would do baggage claim and everything else.
And we are a seasonal airport. The idea of being able to close down part of that operation for several months out of the year is pretty phenomenal.
Or you'd be having international flight from there all year long.
Well, that's gonna be, so in order to get customs services from CBP, would have to have daily service. Where,
Yeah. So, Eric, can I ask you a question? So, I mean, you run this place, would you rather have the same capacity you have today the next 7, 8 years? so that you can have option 3? Or would you rather have more capacity in 3 years and live with the downsides of
The Band-Aids.
what does staff really want
I would, that's great.
Staff said in their very first meeting, they wanted 3.
Yeah, whenever I leave here, I don't want any airport director complaining that I made a bad decision.
So you could live with what you've got for the next 9 years.
Well, and maybe that's not, maybe the question is, if that were to be the model, right, if 3 were to be the model, then what creative solutions can be brought to managing it in the interim, as opposed to just saying, we're stuck with A or B, right? I mean, I trust that Harry and your team will get creative and with whatever consulting point necessary, if that were to be what you're left with, figure out how to make that.
What would be those trade-offs? So what would we said, all right, let's gonna go with 3, but find a way to do an international in 3 years. And then, find a way to get creative around website.
And be able to accommodate 25% more capacity requirements. How would you get there?
That would, honestly, that would have to be sitting down and going operation by operation and figuring it out, but the genius part about that is that what we do right now anyway. So my team they're the masters at being creative. They come up with stuff that I don't even envision. And I imagine that you would do the same thing. We're being creative now by accommodating the growth that we've, gotten with the traffic that we've gotten through here. So it can be done. It would have to be a painful slog in figuring it out, business, line of business by line of business, but it can be done.
Good question. If we went down the route of 1A, would we be able to change midstream and say, this was a terrible idea? We should actually go back to the drawing board and think about building a brand new terminal. At the end of phase 1.
$1 billion, so what?
But both are about 300 million.
David?
Yeah, there was, one sentence that Harry said that kind of I wanted to just pass by, which is the, time period where the airlines may decide to, bring in fewer planes here. We have a huge tourism industry that is dependent on those planes. And, you talked about 2 types of analysis. One is a traffic study, one is a CEQA study, but I think we need a 3rd study and an outreach to the hospitality industry. I know Octave is the chairman, I'm well aware of that, and I know Scott White was involved, but if somebody can assess the potential risk on the economic side for hospitality for whatever period of time, we may have a X% decrease in tourists coming in here by plane. The hospitality industry needs to sort of be very well informed about what that risk is over what period of time. We cannot pass that by as if it's, a minor inconvenience that just may happen. Because they don't want to get caught upside the head like,
Do you think there's gonna be a decrease in number of people coming here because the 4 gates are closed?
The airlines are seeing the demand and they like to make money. So they're gonna send the airplanes, but we have to figure it out.
I think it's just gonna be longer for them to get into the terminal. They'll be stranded out there on the runway somewhere.
Well, I guess the question also is if you've got an airline that's saying, well, right now we just send in a regional jet with 70 or 100 people on it versus a 737 with 125 people on it. Same airline, 2 different pieces of metal. Do you have a sense of what the airlines would prefer there? In a sense, although the passengers that come through here are the customers for Palm Springs and the area, the customers for the airport itself are the airlines. How do they feel about 1A versus 3?
Well, there's some nuance in that. So first, they're focused on being able just to sustain their operation. And part of that has to do with a pilot shortage. Part of that has to do with aircraft deliveries and engine deliveries and things like that. So they have to figure that issue out. And they're also making decisions with that in mind, right? The other side of that, though, is, as I mentioned, the airlines are, at least the airlines here, are happy with Palm Springs. And I spoke with an airline the other day that basically said, well, hey, you need to figure out how to get 4 airplanes. We're sending 4 airplanes. So they're not gonna stop. They're not gonna downsize.
In the very first phases, we did the forecast. Didn't you say, Ryan, that, because we saw double the number of passengers, double the number of gates, so 36 gates, right? And you guys counseled and said, no. We're gonna get, the airlines, we're gonna get rid of all the small planes, and they're gonna replace them with the 737s. And so we're gonna have not double the number of takeoffs and landings, but just bigger planes. That was the premise from the forecast,
And
right?
more turns per day per gate. So that's how you do it, which is why we want, to Ramon's point, we want jet bridge gates that can serve all sizes of aircraft, and they can do as many turns as they want on those gates, and that maximizes the efficiency of the airport. It's kind of like how Southwest operates gate 11 and 9, they turn stuff fast.
Any thoughts on that? Any changes? Still 7.6?
I still think that's a bottleneck though, even, more planes, more people, your bottleneck is still the front counters, same thing, if those 2 small TSA. Ones down there, it's always a good show, planes.
Well, that's gonna be, then phase 2, you build all that out.
Yes,
Sure.
there's
Yeah.
a lot more done.
What did the working group decide?
We were right in the middle.
I'll tell you from my end, I left our last working group meeting thinking that option 3 was the way to go. And after hearing everything we've talked about today, I flipped.
I flipped too. I was for 3 until the 6-year thing kind of scared me.
And so I'm officially happy to change my, or if we're calling it a vote today in my head. I'm having a problem with the 6 years. I'm having a problem with what that means for the passenger experience. So I'm going team 1A.
Yeah, I think I had to say, I was right down the middle after our last meeting. What I didn't know was 6 years, 6.5 years versus 3. And I know, to your point, David, around what is the hospitality group want? They want international, they just feel like.
And I'll also say hospitality, once, we throw the word seasonality around here, but if we had our way, we would very much like to see that flattened out. We would like to see it, stronger summers and ultimately having more traffic throughout the entirety of the year. So, which gives me even more concern for option number 3. So I'm back in camp 1A.
When I was reviewing the material coming in today, I was thinking 1A. Because as I mentioned earlier, I'm very interested in bringing international earlier. But looking at the photos, of course, I go in and out of here too. The truth is that my impression of the facility is that the in and out experience, the check-in, the getting your luggage, it's just too difficult now, given the numbers that there are. And as I looked at the presentations and thought about it today, I went from 1A when I walked in the door to 3. And the main reason for that is because it creates a bigger, modern facility that our customer, the airline, will like to fly in and out of. People will still come to Palm Springs whether they get to look at the mountain walking out of the terminal or not. And although it is a 6-year horizon, it seems to me that there are ways to creatively bring international sooner if we can, if the opportunity is there. And I think it is a wise person who plants a tree even though he or she knows that she will never stand under its shade. I think we need to plan for a longer term and a deeper pop strength.
So I want to just clarify the point that you made around the ticketing area in 1A will be expanded in phase 2, right? So phase 2 will get us more room all the way down south. But how about baggage?
In 1A.
Yeah.
One A envisions taking advantage of what the 32 million that you're gonna invest in baggage claim next year.
Will there be enough room? Will it be address some of the concerns around congestion that exists?
I think so. It's hard to visualize on this 2D, but all of that, the blue concourse in 1A would all be second level. So all that space underneath that could be baggage claim purposes.
Would that be done in phase 1? It would have to be because you have the money to do it.
Yes.
Another thing to add too with 1A and baggage claim is with the FIS, there will also be an international baggage carousel as well. That will be in a sterile area for international process passengers to get their bag.
And that's incorporated in the plan for 1A phase 1.
Yes.
Question, during one phase 1, what happens to the rental car? Where do they operate?
While the contract is being constructed, yeah, that's a good question. It may be busing.
That's a really good question. We don't have.
One point out that it was trailers, one of the parking lots.
Well, just the number of vehicles. I'm more concerned about the vehicles themselves, where you put them.
I mean, ideally, you do most of the construction in the summer to avoid the peak season, but these chances are you're not going to build a $300 million contract in 6 months. So you are going to have to accommodate a busy season.
I might have just split it.
So, just to add, I didn't take any photos of the rental car facility and what we would like to our piece, but it's ugly as well. Yeah, so.
All right, is there any other information that we would ask Ryan to work on? Right now, we've canceled our December meeting.
We haven't.
Oh, we're gonna vote on it. I mean, I'm brainstorming, I'm not concerned, just brainstorming. Is there other information we would want? You've been exploring the Wexler +3 option. To have you guys go back and just take a look at some of these things. And then we will do the meeting in December and make our final vote there. I'm just brainstorming here. Is there information that you think would help you to be more confident about this? Otherwise, we're saying we're 8 to 5 or whatever it is, and here's the pros and cons of both. And just summarize it for city council. Here that, we've done our study and this is the pros and cons of both. And we landed at this number, and this isn't a rousing support of one or the other, but we could just hand it off to city council in a summary of what we think. Unless you feel like we want to invest more time here, and unless you think there's some other information you guys can generate that would change our minds.
Where are we at right now? 85?
8 and 5. 8 for 1A and 5 for 3.
Like here, pros and cons of city council. We've done our job. Let them do their job.
Good.
I have a concern about that.
Go ahead.
When we're a commission, we've all been selected because of our engagement with the community, expertise, etc. I think it would be an unhelpful vent if this commission said, we have no opinion. You appointed us and we're unable to make a recommendation.
No, I think we have an opinion.
Yeah, there's clearly an opinion.
There's an opinion here, and I just think that what we would do is we would include the pros and cons of both.
So there would be a recommendation for 1A, understanding that there's this laundry list of things they need to consider, making a decision.
So is it 5A, did it move to 5A in favor of 1A?
Yeah, unless you changed the mind.
I changed my mind from 1A
You
to
did,
3.
you made it sound like you were joking. Are you officially saying you're joking?
We vote.
I changed my mind from 1A to 3 after the rental thing.
Yeah, so to follow up on the rental car thing, won't we lose parking lots C and E under option 3? We have to build a contract there.
So I can tell you, we are going to be particularly challenged, we're already challenged. In fact, one of our other discussions this morning was converting lot A into a rental car area sooner rather than later, because get to it. If we displace them from that spot, understanding that we have to build a 6-story or 5-story facility, I don't know where.
You're gonna put them in lot D and E, like you, I mean, one way or the other, you're gonna lose something, you're gonna lose parking capacity, and then there's option 3, where you're gonna rental car capacity in option 1.
Is
So here's why I go on the side of the rental car, because the rental car pays us more than parking.
That's true. But the rental car can also have buses that take people from the terminal to the rental car facility temporarily. Whereas passengers, which is what we care about, are gonna be unhappy if they can't park at the airport.
So we will definitely lose most likely parking capacity, which is fine in the summer, because we have available in Twitter, but in the winter, that's our second highest revenue maker. Is parking.
And then we would increase our cost for busing operations. That's gonna come out of our CSD fund, which our CSD fund is to fund our contract.
But we can increase the rate of fee, and then people will offer taxi members for cars.
Would it be bad to go to city council, say, like you said, the pros and cons, and we voted and it was 7-6?
Yeah. I just don't, it's really a tough call, right? It's a tough call, and I think they're gonna struggle with the same things. I think the biggest and best thing we can do for them now is to summarize the pros and cons of this discussion. For the 7-6 towards 1A, they both have significant trade-offs. And perhaps we'll have an opportunity to be able to present to them and share some of the concerns. Short of a whole other design, which I don't think we're gonna do. I think that's the biggest and best thing we can do today. And then maybe Harry, the staff will also pile on and say, 1A means we gotta, go someplace else for the car rentals for 18 months ago. Tell us what are the other implications of these things. Because I think that when you look at 3.5 years to 6 years, that's huge. I think the hospitality organization would be fascinating to see what they think about, I can get international in 3.5 years, or I can wait and get a brand new terminal. I mean, all the things we've discussed, I think they're gonna have reactions to it too. So maybe we will reach out to David's point, reach out to that group and say, here's what we think, now what do you think? And maybe they will give us, they and others will give us more input on this thing, but I'm not sure that we can beat this up anymore based on the information we have so far.
So I think what we can do is send the commission's recommendation forward, but given where we are, I think what will likely happen is we probably need to do some additional outreach, or at least another presentation to the council. So the first meeting in January, and then after council to go to the second meeting in January.
How's that sound?
But if we got the information in writing for us, and it's possible we may change our mind. But I agree with him. So should we still have a meeting, with all of that, still have a meeting on the 20th?
Are we
question would be, will 2 weeks provide a meaningful opportunity to really get answers to any of these things? And I would love to have more information. We need to, you know, beat the questions to death, but we have raised questions that it would be useful and interesting to have more information around. I mean, at all reasonable to try and get that information back.
Would you have materially more information for us that could alter this decision in 2 weeks?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I'm not sure what else we can provide.
Okay. Now, we could come back in 2 weeks and say, here's the report. Now, let's look at the pros and cons in writing. Do we still feel this way, or we do something different? And to check the box, and if it's 7-6, it's 7-6. But the other thing is, it could give us an opportunity to reach out to hospitality and some of the other people and other influencers in our own sphere of influence to say, here are the trade-offs. What do you think? I'm doing the trade-offs, you know, that type of thing. I hate to create another meeting because it's holidays and all that good stuff, but do you want some more time to test this out? And then come back and say, what did we learn? So you're going to be on the 20th, one more shot at this? And we won't have to beat the thing to death, but it'd be great to see what our summary is in writing. And then say, who else chimes in here? It's unfortunate opt-out is in there.
Kevin, is your suggestion then that there be a write-up of at least some of the pros and cons as we've developed them today, such that if there was a meeting, let's just say on the 20th, like it's currently scheduled, we can come either vote again or say, no, I still hear the same, or change.
Yeah, and maybe we'd have the Scott Whites of the world and others step forward and say, you know, here's where we are. Where are you folks on this thing? Because I think David's right. The hospitality people are going to have a big impact on this. And there may be others. There may be other people that we think care about this and give it one more shot. I don't think we're being indecisive by saying, let's just take a run here, because we're right down the middle. There's no one way or another. And do we gather some more information and some input from our people we think are important or have an impact in those things, and then be able to come back and say, international in 3.5 years is a real tipping point, or the CONRAC, you know, that's the thing we really need to worry about.
Well, why don't we just do yes or no, and should we come back?
Yeah.
I think we
And
should.
get that part over.
I think I have some questions for legal before we move forward with our decision. Is that okay?
Yeah, so that, I mean, we can have the meeting on the 20th, so you could answer those questions.
No, that's fine. I wanna, so my concern is we took a vote, which I don't believe we have a majority, because vote changing. On my calculation, the majority would be, well, we have 13 in the meeting right now. So the rule is you divide that by half, which gives us 6.5, and you add 1, which brings us to 7. And the vote is 7-5. So I'd like just Jeremy I'd like for the city attorney to make sure we're not doing anything incorrectly as far as running goes.
Well, you bring up another issue. There are people who are missing from this meeting. And maybe we put this document together, and again, our agenda item will be any other information. Maybe we'll have more people here, and then we can make the final vote. Could you all live with
I
that?
had the impression when you took that, it was just, oh.
Yeah, it's just a poll. Yeah, we're not making a recommendation yet.
Jeremy, did you hear what I discussed with the commission?
Yeah, so what I would recommend doing is doing a motion to see whether or not you want to delay making a recommendation until the next meeting. And then if that passes, then you'll delay it out to December 20th at this point. Because I don't necessarily think that my recommendation with that initial vote would probably be to do that again once the members had an opportunity to change their vote and do another official motion. So I don't necessarily know with the flip-flopping if that one was necessarily completely valid for our purposes, but yeah, so I recommend just doing a motion for continuing this on to the December 20th meeting, and then seeing if the commission will make a recommendation at that time.
Thank you.
Would someone like to propose that? All right, do I have a second? All right, all in favor, say aye. Oh, wait, I'm trying, guys, I'm trying.
Banks.
Aye.
Behrman,
Aye.
Burke,
Aye.
Corcoran,
Aye.
Beltman,
Aye.
Baum,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Michaelis,
Aye.
Hart. Aye. Pie,
Aye.
Wise,
Aye.
Wiseman,
Aye.
Young.
Alright, so staff, do you think you have enough here to do a draft of this?
Yes.
Good enough? And you guys can chime in as well? Alright,
And then what are the other information that we want to present?
do you have any other things you want to explore before next meeting?
I have, well, to your point, I would like to know what the plan would be for having to build a contract where the current rental car companies are under option one, and then under option three, what you're gonna do about the loss of parking in lots P and E when you have to build a contract there over the next 6 years.
Option three.
And is there any contractual hindrance with Signature Air?
Moving then. David?
So with all these pros and cons, we're looking at certain issues as the airport, sees them and our staff sees them for baggage claim and aids and all this stuff. But the issue of the future use of this building under Plan 3 is not something that this group can really answer, but I think we need to at least somewhere in the pros and cons acknowledge it. And I don't think it can be addressed by saying, well, many community groups have expressed interest in different things. I think this city has a long history of white elephants. And if we don't, there's one Canyon in Mesquite for 20 years. There's the Thompson Hotel that's now getting completed after 12 years. And I just don't think we can, I don't think it's the job of this group to decide what the alternative uses are, or to proclaim that there are interested parties, so you don't have to worry about it. I just think it needs to be acknowledged in some form that the future use of this space is not addressed.
In option three.
In option 3.
Yeah. So to put in the affirmative is, let's pass an option 3 would be, what's the process to figure out what happens to this building?
There is nothing proposed at this time.
And in fairness to staff and nobody's asked anybody to do it.
So that wasn't meant as a criticism. I don't actually think it's your role to go out and get people in the community all ginned up about how they're gonna use this building. That's kind of the council's job, but I just don't think we can.
Yeah.
Be silent on it. It needs to be written somewhere.
And anecdotally, you know that people are interested in getting their tanks in this building, but there's been no formal outreach or whatever. I get your point. All right, so we're off to the 20th. Staff is gonna go ahead and do a summary of this. Would it be legal to share that draft so we can get input before the 20th?
It is not.
It is now. Oh, geez, there we go.
It'll be part of the agenda, right?
It'll be part of the agenda.
But it's, I can come out early, because there's no rules of.
Jeremy, did you wanna chime in?
Yeah, I would recommend just including that as just part of the agenda rather than sending it out to each commission member individually. I think that just creates the risk of inadvertent discussion. But if the agenda were to be posted, within before the 72-hour period, then I don't necessarily think there would be an issue there. At the end of the day, it just depends on how quickly all this information can be compiled. So, for that December 20th meeting, they're facing that hard deadline of the 72-hour posting period for Brown Act purposes.
If we do get the agenda out earlier, or even if we don't, bring your questions. So we don't have to take, we'll try to use our time on the 20th really efficiently. And then, learn new information, ask more questions, and then we'll take the vote again and take it from there. All right? Christina? Sarah, you ready? All right, can I get a proposal to end the meeting?
So moved.
All right, guys, all in favor, we see all, I guess we can, all in favor.
Hold on. Vice Chair Corcoran.
Yes.
May I make a suggestion that, everybody put together their pros and cons and send them to Christina, and then we can compile them through there?
Are you all willing to do that? Sure. Great.
Okay, thank you.
We can fast forward that for Scott, that's great.
Do you have a date to turn it into Christine?
Good call.
Pros and cons, send it to Christina, that'll help us move quickly in putting this document together. I know it's extra
By
work.
Monday, December 11th, would that work for everyone?
It's 5 days. You okay?
In the afternoon, by the afternoon.
And if it helps, the working paper that's in your packet already has pros and
Good point. Let's start with that. And then we can add to it.
Am I correct that under the Brown Act rules, if I send you an email when I ask about pros and cons that I think of both proposals, am I allowed to CC that to the commission? No. Okay.
I would not recommend ceasing that to the commission. You could send it off to staff so then they could pile it for the agenda packet. But, if you're ceasing that to the quorum, so the majority of the commission, I think that would create an issue under the Brown Act.
Got it. Let me just do me a favor. Send us your pros and cons. So we'll start with what Ryan and his team has put together. Add yours on top of it, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So send us what
And
you.
it's not all exhaustive, there are new ones that we come up with.
All right. Yeah, you can take it.
Remember, we have to have them by the 11th to Christine.
Yeah. So,
Recap that.
sorry, guys, we're gonna get out of here. What I'm saying is, let's let Ryan send us what they've already created. And then we can add on to that, so that we're not sending 40 copies of the same thing.
So Ryan will send it to me and then I will send it to the commission and then you'll respond back to me by the 11th.
We're good?
Yeah.
All right. This is a big commitment of time. This decision is huge. Thank you for your patience and for respectfully listening to all the different points of view. We'll get there. We'll see you on the 20th. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.